I'm on the clock in 9 drafts. We'll make those picks. We're going to talk camp news and notes, some round 18 clicks that are fun right now, guys that are going to rise by the end of August. Stealing signals. Let's go. What is up? Welcome in to Stealing Signals. I have not been doing these as much lately as I wanted to. I did one last Tuesday. We skipped Wednesday because I had some other content that I was getting done. Been doing a lot of guest spots lately. Was on with Kevin Cole this morning on Unexpected Points. Definitely check that out. That was a really fun conversation with him. Going to talk some news and notes today. Hoping you guys will help me a little bit in the chat as I try to dial in. That's one of the parts of my game that I need to get better at, and I'm trying to dial in good resources, I guess, good information. Who is being traded where? Adam asks. I don't know. It's a great question. But let's start by making some picks. I don't know. I haven't looked at Underdog in a while, and quite plausible that I'm close to timing out. Ben's got 56 picks to make himself. We're always out here with our slow drafts. I had the 100, as you guys know, and that number is dwindling. I have finished up. There's a couple full ones there. I have finished up about half of them. It's been tough, honestly, with this many drafts at this time of year, with so much news to be trying to figure out and trying to do a lot of the other content, the writing, the guest pods, and the following camp news, and then just like constantly drafting has been a little bit wild. But I am kind of coming out of this stretch of slow drafts. But yeah, let's jump into some of these picks. We'll start by making a couple here. This isn't an eliminator where I'm at 1-3-6-2. I got CJ Stroud, I got Singletary, Javonte, and Zach Charbonnet. I've starred Josh Downs here, and we're at 155, and he's somehow fallen that far, which is crazy. I have 2 week 14 buys already in my receiver room, but I mean, I don't mind stacking up the week 14 stuff and being like, okay, I just want to, like, it's almost like an advance rate play. I want to get there. And then, you earn solid money just for advancing to week 14. You earn $100 on your $10 buy-in. I don't think there's any way I can pass Josh Downs here. Josh Downs. Oh, William. Stealing Signals graphic is covering your face cam. That's pretty hilarious. I can just do it as a background instead of an overlay. Thank you for that note. Oh, look at this. I forgot about this. I got a banner. Or what, like, can I do as a ticker? Sign up for Stealing Signals newsletter at bengresh.substack.com. It's a pretty fun one. Yeah, like I always do a poll job. Like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I am going to be going live throughout August for a lot of these draft things. Probably do some more of the guest streams to draft on other people's accounts. I had Sean Siegel on last night. We did an FFPC BBT last night. That was a lot of fun. We did. I had Jacob Sanderson on not too long ago, where he and I did a Best Ball Mania draft on his account, which was incredibly fun. Yeah, trying to get the subscribers up over 1.5K on the YouTube. I've only done about 20 of these streams this summer. That's awesome. I'm really trying to get to 2K. The goal's 3K by the start of the season. So we got to double this number. Go subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. We're here for the chair. When I go get a drink and I just leave my chair chilling in the background. So we took Josh Downs in this pick, in this eliminator, just kind of keeping it moving here. A seventh wide receiver. I've talked through eliminator strategy where I really like to be deep at receiver. I think that creates a floor. An imbalanced draft structure to create floor in your build. Still have Singletary, Javonte, and Charbonnet as my top 3 receivers. That's very, very solid. Kelsey Schultz is a really nice tight end room. And I got Stroud that's stacked with Nico, that's stacked with Schultz. So if I do get all the way through to the final, I have Zay Flowers here with a Baltimore bring back. It's going to be tough to get through week 14. I got buys in every position group in week 14 there. I like the way that I made a full season bet on Houston because I talked through on the eliminator. It's not about floor. It's about floor in the sense that I was just talking about it with wide receiver. But really, you want to build a dominant team. And that's the other reason I like to go 0 RB in these. This is a fun one. I really like this eliminator team here that I have been putting together. Let's go over to a BBM that's got an hour left. 2, 3, 4, 2. This is a BBM where you may never see me have this little wide receiver capital. Started Amon-Ra, Nico, Zay. 1, 2, 3. Took Keenan in the 5th. What was the 4th round pick? It was Lamar with Zay. So I decided I took Zay higher up in the 3rd, and then I decided to take Lamar in the middle of the 4th, even ahead of Jalen Hurts here, to get a unique Zay-Lamar combo. Obviously, Lamar and Andrews can be paired at the 4-5. Kind of pushed it here a little bit with Nico in the middle of the 2nd. Fun start there. I think Zay, the key to doing this type of stuff, I've criticized, I think, in the past, some of the pushing guys up for stacks and stuff. The key to doing is you have to believe that these guys belong in these ranges. And for me, Zay Flowers is very much in this tier, and I will take him in the 3rd round and would be comfortable taking him in the 3rd round regardless. And for me, Lamar Jackson has the QB ceiling to be in the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts tier, even if he hasn't scored like they have in the last couple of years. One of the real keys to Jackson's scoring profile in fantasy so far is that he's never had more than, I think, 7 rushing TDs in a season. Both those other guys had 15 last year. Obviously, he's not going to get goal line work. Yeah, he's never had more than 7. Only had 5 last year, 3 and 2 in the 2 years prior to that. He had 7 both years, back in 2019 and 2020. But he's not really had big rushing TD numbers. I mentioned that because he still provides a ton of rushing value. There's nobody that projects for more rushing yardage. He's so incredible with his efficiency as a runner and his skill set as a runner. He's had 750 plus rushing yards in every year he's been a primary starter, and he only played 12 games in 2 of those. He's been over 1,000 multiple times. He was over 800 last year in a little bit of a different offense, but even 800 is a very meaningful difference from Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts will probably be in the 500-yard rushing range as opposed to the 800-yard range. It's a meaningful 30-point gap. That's 5 touchdowns rushing, right? And so Lamar still provides incredible value. What I'm arguing is that if he could somehow get to an 8 to 10 rushing TD season, it'd be massive. Now, that's probably not something that people are really buying into in a year where they bring in Derrick Henry and everyone's expecting him to get 9 million rushing TDs. But grab Lamar in this draft. Saw a note that Diontae's struggling at camp with a lot of drops. That's funny from the perspective of he's had drops issues in the past. But also I would say I'm not worried about it. This is early camp, early days. I didn't see that note. I quickly jumped into it when I saw it because it is, it's, I think all this stuff is important, but that's one that it doesn't surprise me to hear that his new team is, it's like, oh yeah, this guy drops the ball sometimes. He gets open a lot, earns a lot of targets. That's fantastic. By the way, I love these notes. I would love to hear any more notes that you guys have been coming across that you think are interesting. Big part of today's show, I think, should be talking through players who have moved, a little bit in value and those types of things. There's some guys I really want to discuss. Generic Prince, Jalen Tolbert, really interesting one as we go back to the show from a couple months ago when I talked about from the Dallas Cowboys and their setup and how it was similar to the Rams last year, where there was this void in target earners behind the big star. and the potential for somebody to really bubble up. And we've been hearing some really positive stuff about Jalen Tolbert that has me taking him in round 18 where applicable. But yeah, any notes, very, very interesting. William here asks, have dabbled in any eliminators or weekly winners drafts? Not the weekly winners so far, and maybe not this year because it's just so much that I'm trying to get into. I am doing a lot of eliminators. Just took a pick in an eliminator a minute ago. But let's get back to this draft. I'm bouncing all over the place. We got Amon-Ra, Nico, Zay, Lamar, Keenan Allen, George Kittle, David Montgomery. So I'm trying to figure out why I have so little wide receiver firepower. And I take Keenan Allen in the 5th, and I take Kittle at 67 in the middle of the 6th because I took the early Lamar pick. And by the time I got up in the 7th round, I could have taken Keon Coleman or Jameson Williams, but Addison was gone. JSN, Lad McConkey, Diontae Johnson had all gone. And so because I prioritized an elite tight end with Kittle in the 6th after having taken an early QB, and this is the instructive thing here for me, in your fasts and your slows, whatever, this is why I'm having a really hard time taking elite quarterbacks. I'm underweight all of the elite quarterbacks. We talked a little bit about Anthony Richardson. I've tried to backpedal. I don't want, all the texts and all the tweets and everything. When Anthony Richardson has a good game, I'm already dreading that because I, one time said that he was overvalued, and then backpedaled it on that exact same show. I do think this element where he's going to be in the same tier as Mahomes and Hurts and Allen and those guys, and there's a 17 pick gap between him and Stroud in this particular draft. I prefer the Stroud value at that point, even though Richardson provides a different type of fantasy scoring with the mobility, because I do think there's that big of a gap between what they're going to be able to offer as a passer, even in the upside cases for Richardson. But, how high his upside cases could go is a huge part of the conversation. And me and Jacob Sanderson discussed that. He's a big Colts fan. We talked about how if you're betting on Richardson, you're betting on the Colts to outperform market expectations on their team in terms of points scored and on the look-ahead lines and all that stuff. That's fine. It's a totally fine bet to make. That's what Lamar Jackson did the year that he won the MVP the first time. The Ravens offense outperformed market expectations. That's what Patrick Mahomes did when he exploded the first year, right? The Chiefs massively outperformed expectations. That's what CJ Stroud did last year. The Texans massively outperformed expectations. I will just note that the Colts expectations aren't low, and Richardson's ADP is so high that that's got to be the median outcome, is him outperforming. I have some exposure to Richardson because I do see the high-end outcomes. I do think he's a tricky bet at cost in most of the spots in his range, but we're trying to get first, so I get it. Anyway, he's one of the early QBs I've taken the most of, frankly. I've taken more of him than Mahomes, whose profile, I understand he could throw for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns, and the offense is so much better and all those things, but he's going pretty high. His profile doesn't feature enough rushing for me with the opportunity cost at wide receiver and the elite tight ends. Tried to get a little bit more Hurts and a little bit more Allen on this pass of slow drafts, but probably not a ton. And obviously I took Lamar here, and I've tried to get a little bit more of him as well. But every time I do it, it does become tricky unless I give up the early tight end. But I want to try to stack those two things. The early tight end's a lever I want to pull regardless. I don't want it to be where the few times I build an early QB draft, I'm not pulling the early tight end lever. I want to see if I can manage those together, because I think the early tight end's a strategy I want to be stacking with every other strategy I try this year. And so I take Kittle here, where I think he's a screaming value at pick 67. But because of that, I don't really have an opportunity at a running back, or a wide receiver in round 7. It can dry up that quick over on Underdog. I took Amon-Ra at the start, so I took David Montgomery. I wound up probably getting Jared Goff. I did in round 11. Do a little bit of a Detroit bet there. I got Jonathan Brooks the next round, David Njoku, Chase Brown. I'm building out the other stuff instead of trying to chase wide receiver with picks like Joshua Palmer that I don't mind taking at times, but some of these picks are not going to be the right pick. The wide receivers in this range are typically the wrong pick. And so, I certainly could see some of these guys like Judy and Dontavian Wicks, who I take a lot. They both go a little high in this particular draft. You could argue that I should have taken A.D. Mitchell over Chase Brown at 115. Because there's some latent upside there for sure. The rookie upside there. I definitely need to do something. And then you see here in the 12th, Josh Downs goes one pick ahead of me. He's another guy I would have really liked to get here. A big run of receivers. Leggett, Polk, Mooney, all these guys would have been helpful picks for me in 12. So I'm on the clock here with only 4 wide receivers. But it is Amon-Ra, Nico, Zay, and Keenan Allen. It's 4 guys that, I mean, I'm assuming health clearly with these guys. That's the bet on this team. And if they're healthy, I expect strong volume out of all 4 of them. So that is a meaningful, trade-off or positive. I get Kittle and Njoku, so I do a nice 2 tight end build. I'm done there. I get Montgomery, Jonathan Brooks, and Chase Brown as my top 3 running backs. Montgomery gives you that stability, that floor of volume, some touchdown spike potential. He's a fine pick at pick 78. The thing that kind of makes him a tough click is that you can get a probably similar scoring profile at running back still even later than pick 78. You can get Javonte Williams or whatever, and it's probably going to be just as good as Montgomery with, I would argue, probably even more upside. Although Montgomery's upside case would include a Gibbs injury. Sometimes, we always think of the older guy might get hurt, and then it unlocks the younger guy. But sometimes the younger guy can be the one who gets hurt. And so Montgomery could feasibly have a spiked workload in that way. And then Jonathan Brooks and Chase Brown, though, I think are 2 huge swings to go with Montgomery. I really like the way that running back room has started in terms of having different types of profiles there. If you take a Montgomery, take some big cracks behind him. Jackson and Goff, totally fine with the 2 QB build there. So things are setting up well in these regards. Bateman is a stack option coming up soon that I can consider to give me a little bit more receiver depth at the current pick. I'm going to go Mike Williams, who I don't love taking necessarily, but I have a lot of veteran target earning for the early weeks here. Excuse me. I am a little bit worried about Mike Williams. About Mike Williams. I'm looking at the chat. Sorry. Oh, man. Allergies hit me right out of the blue. Woo. Not sure where that came from. Apologies. Get some hay fever stuff, and they just randomly activated. I am worried about Mike Williams' timeline and his ramp-up period, but I'm not particularly worried about his fit. I think he's a pretty nice play in this Jets offense. That Aaron Rodgers throwing Mike Williams open is that. Mike Williams has needed this type of guy. Thank you, Bruce. Only guy in here willing to say bless you. The rest of you guys just asking me questions about Chase. Chase. Well, no, this is Jamar Chase. No, I'm just kidding. Angus, that is a good question. We'll get there in a moment. Bindles, what's up, buddy? Ready to mine some camp. FF Coder says, I'm more excited about the other Jalen getting the positive buzz. And then Bruce says McMillan. I'm wondering if you mean McMillan or you're talking about Jalen Brooks, because I was talking about Jalen Tolbert, the other Jalen in the same passing game. I haven't seen a lot of positive buzz on Jalen Brooks, though, so I would be interested in hearing that. But yeah, I was talking about being underweight on the top QBs. It really does impact your build a little bit, although I think this one has a shot. 2 tight end, 2 QB, that's all addressed. 4 good receivers. A nice start to the running back build. Now the Mike Williams, Rashad Bateman, and some of the other late round receivers, like you guys are talking about some of them, the McMillans. And I mean, DJ Chark is, I think, very draftable at this stage with all of the news out of Chargers camp that Quentin Johnston's basically not ready. All right. This is a sprint draft I'm going to go to next, but I'm going to go to you guys' questions real quick because I'm trying to do both. I think it's fine to pull up Zay occasionally, but he's not a profile I'm super comfortable being extremely overweight on over Moore, Diggs, and Tank. I think that's a reasonable take. I don't know why Moore would specifically add to that group. To me, Zay and Moore are, if not in the same tier, that Zay's a tier higher. Diggs and Tank, I guess I don't understand why Tank isn't in. To me, Tank and Zay are very much in the same tier as well. I don't know what the profile issue is. People have talked about design touches and stuff, but that's going to be there. The offense is spread. It's more wide receiver focused. Zay had a really good target spread run as a rookie. Even when you control for some of those other stuff, he still did a lot of things well. It developed over the course of the season towards the end of the year. He's a first-round pick. He's the future of the, like they were incorporating Odell Beckham as like a rotational deep threat, and he ran a really high targets per route run because when they put him on the field, they tended to throw directly to him. He's not a part of the offense anymore. Devontae Walker, some of those other guys could matter. But it seems to me very clearly a very clear year 2 breakout profile where like people are getting way too nuanced with the data from year 1 and the specific ways he was used and the ways that he came along and are like, he's something that he's not, which is like he's just a gadget player or something like that. There was a lot of really good stuff in Zay Flowers' rookie season that is it's a really good example of where I've talked on a lot of recent pods, including with Kevin Cole this morning, of where the data is too much, man. Like we're all putting way too much into the data. Like you don't know what Zay Flowers' profile is. Like respectfully, you don't know. We don't know. I'm turning into David Kitchen here, but like I've done this long enough to tell you that the rookie season elements of Zay Flowers' profile that if we're going to cut out splits data and say that he had too many touches around the line of scrimmage or all this stuff, like that's not who he's going to develop into long-term for sure. Right. Like that was the thought on Deebo Samuel. Like he could only be that or something. A couple years later, he's an absolute star. Is Zay Flowers Deebo Samuel? No. But nobody was Deebo Samuel before Deebo Samuel. The point is that everybody kind of carves their own path when they become good. And if you take a long view like bigger picture on Zay, like one of the things we talk a lot about is like humility-based drafting or all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we're wrong on collegiate profile, some of that kind of stuff, because Zay Flowers' collegiate profile is not perfect either. I can understand why people may be a little concerned in that respect, but he did earn quite a bit of volume throughout college from his sophomore year, 24% targets per run as a sophomore, stuck around that range, 25, 25.6 the next 2 years. The yards per target wasn't amazing, but the ADOT was higher in college. The offense is built around him. There's just like, I think this is too precise is what I would say. I think this is way too precise criticizing Zay's profile in this way. I'd be curious, Ben, and I'm sure you've mentioned in the comments, and I'll get down to it, but I would be curious what about his profile you feel this confident on. Now, you're saying you're not comfortable being extremely overweight on him over those other guys, and so that's an important caveat. I'm not extremely overweight on him. I don't pull him up all the time. I'm probably 12% on him or something. I need to check my exposures. I'm excited to get done with these 100 drafts, and I'm going to do a big exposure review soon before I really get into the next drafts. I was thinking about making another drive to Oregon, starting some more slow so they overlap a little, but I don't. I only probably got a couple more batches of slow drafts to go, and I don't want to start those drafts until I do a decent look at my exposures and review my portfolio a little bit, and then come up with an important game plan for how I want to approach that last group and go into those drafts with, some certain things in mind that I want to accomplish. There'll be about 200 drafts at that point. So, people have asked, like, am I going to max enter a bunch of the different stuff? Like, I wish I could, but I don't know with the way that I do the slows and all that, if I'm going to be able to. I think next, I know that I can't do 100 drafts next time with all the content requirements that are ramping up for me right now. But I do think I can maybe layer them, do 40 or 50, and then in a couple of weeks, maybe start 40 or 50 more. I don't know how I'll manage it all, but anyway, I'm excited to see where I'm at on Zay. I think I'm probably in like I said like probably the 12% range or something, 15% maybe at the high end. I'm not all in on him, but he's getting a bad rap right now from analysts, in my opinion. You mentioned you have almost zero of Pittman, Henry, Etienne, so you're still 10%. So, but he's not your favorite profile. I mean, there you go. We're not even that far off, obviously. But just in terms of the verbiage of the way that you phrased this, that was something I felt like was interesting to unpack a little bit. Bruce is in agreement, underweight all the top QBs except Allen and Hurts. I do really think structurally it's really hard to justify the opportunity cost and to get through the builds in a way that that is going to be like the best way to win this year, essentially. I do think those guys can score in a massive way. I don't know. I guess I don't believe that. That it's hard to visualize them being the best way to win this year. The quarterback's the one position where I don't have a strong opinion on where the points can come from. I do think the early guys in a vacuum are reasonably priced. And I'm trying to layer in all the different types of quarterbacks, but I am underweight the elites. It's just an easier build type. And so I guess that's what it comes down to, is like from a portfolio management perspective, I think you can win with the early QBs. I just think you have to thread a really delicate needle. And I don't know that I want to, I don't think my edge is trying to take the early QB and then thread the late round wide receiver needle. I like the other ways that I can build. I do need to get a little bit fortunate, I think, with some of the window QBs, because I don't go late QB often. It's I take a Lawrence or a Jaden Daniels or one of those guys in the middle rounds that I think has some real upside. Kyler Murray is still a reasonably high quarterback, and somebody who I think though can still outperform that, and he's sometimes available after the wide receiver window kind of comes to a close. I'm hopeful that I can get enough QB upside, and it's a season where one of those guys hits, and those teams that I have built, because I think I can build some really fun wide receiver and running back and early elite tight end rooms. But I guess I don't feel hyper confident that, Kyler's going to be able to have that season and get back to being a top 5 quarterback. I certainly think it's possible. I talked about it with Sean last night on our live draft. I certainly think you look at what he did, you go back to his profile, look what he did in high school, look what he did in college, look at how good of a prospect this guy actually was. People don't understand what Kyler Murray is. This guy was an absolute statistical superstar at every level, came into the NFL and was doing that at the NFL for a while. He was, for a lot of people in fantasy, he was like the QB2 in a couple of those draft years. Then he tears his ACL. He hurts his knee in season in a year where he's in the MVP discussion and plays hurt the rest of the second half of the season. He was putting up huge numbers that year, carrying along the corpse of AJ Green and some of these other guys in a Cliff Kingsbury offense. And that's one of the big bull cases for him, is Drew Petzing did a good job last year, I think, in Arizona, and getting out from under Cliff Kingsbury, who he's played with his whole career, is potentially a huge win. But yeah, he hurt his knee the one year. Then the next year he tore his ACL and was out. He played hurt with like a sprained MCL one season, then tore his ACL. Then last year came back from that torn ACL late in the season. And now we're just like, Kyler Murray doesn't have it anymore. He doesn't have any upside. He's nothing. He'll never return to that high-end player. Guy's 26. He turns 27 in a few days here. Plenty of career to go. Plenty of career to go for Kyler. He just hasn't played a full season since his second season. 2021, 14 games. That was a sprained MCL season, but it was his best season. It was his best passing season. Passer rating over 100. Before he hurt the MCL, you go look at his early 2021 game log. Let's just look at it. That's what we do on this show. We like to pull stuff up. I don't know why I'm on a Kyler Murray tangent. It's been a while since we've got on one of these shows, and I can just talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. I know you guys have always enjoyed that. Let's go to Kyler Murray's 2021 game log. First game of the year, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did throw 1 pick, ran for 20 yards and a TD. Second game of the year, 400 yards on 80% completions, 3 TDs, ran for 30 yards and a touchdown. Did throw 2 picks. Third game of the year, 316, no passing TDs, but also ran for another touchdown. So rushed for TDs 3 games in a row. Was throwing for about 300 yards a game those first few games. Fourth game, 82% completion percentage that third game. Fourth game, 75% completion percentage, 268, 2 touchdowns, no picks, runs for 39 yards. Fifth game, 71% completion percentage, 239 and a touch. Sixth game, 67% completion percentage, still very high, 229 and 4 TDs, right? Not a lot of rushing those 2 games. Fifth game, he goes for over 70% completion. Again, 261 and 3 touchdowns. The 8th game, he gets hurt. He throws a couple picks. He has a rough game. Let's pull that into the sample. Let's look at what he did over those 8 games. 72.7% completion percentage. I'm pretty sure he was leading the league at that time. 17 TDs, 7 picks. Not a perfect TD to interception ratio, but a solid one. 8.9 yards per attempt. He was averaging 285 pass yards per game, in addition to almost 20 rush yards per game, and he had 3 rush TDs over those 8 games. Then he hurt his MCL. He missed 3 games. He came back. First game back in Chicago. Remember this game. He wasn't supposed to come back this quick. They only threw 15 times. They won. He came back because they were good. Look at this start, the result column here. Win, 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 win. They lose the game that he gets injured against the Packers, but the Cardinals actually started 7-0 that season. They lose. He misses 3 games, but he comes back and he plays against Chicago because he gave them their best chance to win. They win a game where only throws 15 passes. They go on to actually lose 4 of their final 5, and they lose in their playoff game that year. He never really looks the same the rest of the way that season. But still, in only 14 games, finishes with a pretty strong passing total. I mean, if we go do his average over 14 games, he still averaged 270 passing yards per game. For a 17-game season, would have been about 4,600 passing yards. Would have been about a 30 touchdown season if you would have played a 17-game season. Again, we're extrapolating a 14-game season here. But this was the best season of his career, where he got hurt in season with a sprained MCL. The next year he doesn't start as well, and that's part of where he loses the luster. It's not as great of an early season, but it's not bad. And then he gets hurt again. And part of the issue is like, Kyler can never stay healthy. This is not quite as good of a stretch in the first 9 games before he gets hurt. And then he winds up tearing his ACL after he comes back. And then obviously last year. But I mean, can Kyler Murray be great? I mean, I definitely am not betting against that, especially if Cliff Kingsbury was maybe holding him back a little. We go back to 2020. This is his best fantasy year because he stays healthy the whole year. He throws 26 touchdowns. He also runs for 11 TDs. Check out the rushing column. Started this season with rush TDs in like 9 of the first 10 games or something like that. I mean, Kyler Murray can score in a way that challenges the studs. He's a dude that when you can get him after the wide receiver window's kind of closed and the opportunity cost is a little bit different. I mean, man, like I'm just hopeful this is a year where somebody like that really hits, because I do think that the top QBs can be, the answer a little bit. But what's up, guys? The Chase question, are you thoughts on Chase getting more slot usage with Boyd gone? His target spread running out of the slot is around 29%. I guess I don't have strong thoughts on this kind of a thing. I kind of just like don't care where Jamar Chase lines up because he's Jamar Chase. I see these conversations a lot. It's like, oh yeah, we'll get more slot usage out of him. That's really good for him. We get more slot usage out of CeeDee Lamb. Maybe that's what unlocked CeeDee Lamb. I tend to be like, I mean, the really good players are really good, and the defenses are trying to key on them. Yeah, I guess the thoughts are like, yes, I'm happy if the team is thinking about ways to make it harder on the defense to take him out of games, basically. But I don't feel like he's needs a slot bump because he's Jamar Chase. You know what I mean? So go drink a glass of water. Chair's got this. After I was coughing earlier, that is a fantastic comment. Could have just left the chair to hang here. Angus's thought was, if the sneeze is going to take me out, got to get my question in quick. Love that as well. Is Kupp this year's Mike Evans, undervalued veteran with upside? Certainly an option there. Stephon Diggs, another one. There are some clear rebound candidates. The thing about Evans, I mean, I would maybe volunteer Devontae Adams as well, a guy who can earn plenty of volume and needs some efficiency rebound. Raphael says, Gretsch got a thought. If the Lions are top 5 offense like Vegas thinks, should we be taking more Jameson Williams? If we don't like JMO, take Demont. Thoughts? I think that's yeah, I mean, I definitely think the secondary pieces are worth taking shots on in this offense for sure. I don't know about taking a ton more Jameson Williams. I'm trying to mix him in a little bit. He's a tricky play. But yeah, David Montgomery could definitely overperform. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. The way you frame it is intriguing. They're like Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra, and Laporta are still going to be like the big names, right? They all go a lot higher. So there are other secondary pieces in good offenses that are available as well. And you're kind of like, I mean, do we just target the secondary pieces in good offenses? What's the overall approach? But yeah, I mean, that's I'm not saying that's a bad way to think about it. I think it's a very solid way to think about it. Coder was talking about McMillan, who continues to get a ton of buzz. UW guy. Definitely think he's a candidate to be a really intriguing late round guy. Yeah, Bruce makes a great point. It was a force in the playoffs if he didn't fumble the goal line. That's Zay Flowers. He did get a lot better as the season came along last year. Kind of scrolling through here. Absolute Sauce says Kyler McBride just seems like the way to win this year. I totally agree. Did something happen to Zay at Ravens camp? I just got a Zay Lamar at the 4-5 turn. I don't know, but that's a great value for sure. Ben says the only reason I have 10% Zay is leg up and Crane being high on him. The Ravens offense doesn't need to make Zay a 1,400-yard receiver to be elite. Just feels like the price is the 85th percentile outcome. You need him to get an absolutely absurd target share to break his ADP. I don't think that holds up either, bud. I mean, they were a different offense last year. Cold pass rate was, 56%, but they won 13 games. Their pass rate over expected was basically neutral last year. Played fast, 35.6 called passes per game. You have Lamar scrambling for a big chunk of that. I think we're going to see that number. I mean, they tried to make Lamar more of a drop back passer. Steve Young was talking about this recently with, I want to say with Kevin Clark on his, Omaha show, where the Ravens basically, finally gave Lamar the ability to throw to win last year, to sort of let the passing part of his profile be the thing that dictates. And the way he framed it was like, Lamar has the potential to be the greatest quarterback of all time. And to get there, he, because he's such a dynamic runner, but to get there, he needs to be able to pass in an offense that, is pass first and really dissect offenses as a passer and then use the rushing and the mobility and all of that stuff. And his take was that's what we saw from Todd Monken's offense last year, is they started down that path and that we're sort of entering this next phase of what Lamar Jackson could be, which, I mean, he could and maybe should take a step forward was the idea, which is absurd because he won the MVP, right? Like, the idea that he could take a step forward is, obviously intriguing. So if the passing game from a volume perspective has enough called dropbacks, like obviously Lamar's scrambling and his, play style is going to limit the pass attempts per dropback. Every mobile quarterback that's true for, where some number of the called dropbacks are not going to become attempts. But in most cases, that's because they don't become checkdowns. It's like it cuts out the running back targets, but the downfield targets don't get hammered too much, right? He still makes his downfield read. If it's not there, then he scrambles instead of checking down. So you talk about like the insane like target share. Like I don't think it's that out of line. First of all, like I don't think that's impossible by any means. You go look at what they had last year in terms of running back targets. Let's go. As a team, 16% running back targets. The year prior, only 10%. I mean, those are low numbers. Usually the running back target rate's closer to 20%. Now Derrick Henry's your lead back. I don't think they're going to be thrown to the running backs a bunch. Obviously, they throw to the tight ends a decent amount. But I do think it's mostly like downfield reads. And then, Lamar's he's going to throw to the backs a little bit to keep from running. The point is a wide receiver target rate should be high overall. I don't know, man. Like I've heard all the stuff about Zay. I projected him for a 23% target share, and I have him in the range with Stephon Diggs, who I'm high on. I have Diggs well above Tank. I actually projected him meaningfully ahead of Tank. I have him in the range of Devonta Smith and Malik Neighbors, guys I'm very high on. in Cooper Kupp's range in terms of projections, which, projections are not the whole story, but this idea that like Zay Flowers' profile makes it very difficult for him to see a real ceiling, it's not really borne out in the numbers as I see it. I mean, part of it also, like, very small part of it, but like should actually get some rushing work as well, like a receiver who will get some manufactured touches out of the backfield, which isn't nothing. Like I project him for 8 carries and 51 yards, but that's an extra 5 points. 0.2 rushing TDs. That's an extra point and a half. Last year he had 8 carries, 56 yards, and a rushing TD. It's an extra, 12 points or whatever it is, 11.5 points. It's not the whole story or anything, right? But it's something. But yeah, I mean, I have him right there with like not far off of Brandon Ayuk, not far off of Marvin Harrison in terms of, projection. So again, that's not the whole story or anything, but I didn't find when I went through and broke down this passing game and how it was different under Todd Monken last year that we were, Bruce just mentioned this. I mentioned a minute ago, OBJ had a high targets per route run last year. I think when you look at the passing game and where the volume's going to go, like it didn't feature Mark Andrews last year. Mark Andrews' targets per route run was a career low by a lot, and his ADOT was a career low by a lot. He became, he's still good. He's still going to rack up targets and volume and all those things, but it's more of a shotgun spread, move the ball around offense. Bateman's hurt again in camp. He had been getting some really positive buzz for a bit there. Devontae Walker, Nelson Aguilar's the rest of your receiver room. Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Derrick Henry's your lead back. Maybe Justice Hill is catching some passes out of the backfield. Zay Flowers, again, first round pick last year, was efficient in year one. I both don't think that he has to have this monster target share and also don't see why he can't get there. Because I only projected him for 23.5%, like I said, and still have him as a pretty strong projection outcome. But, I'm mostly just talking through this because I think Ben has some really sharp thoughts, and I appreciate you sharing those. But I'm perhaps not buying, that particular take, or more than perhaps, I guess. Let's look at this team. It's a sprint team. We're in the very final round. Got to take my last pick here. It's a 2-5-8-2 right now. So let's figure out what position we're going to add to. I don't have anything in the queue. Lamar Herbert at QB is probably fine. Bijan, Mostert, Trey Benson, Kendre Miller, Tyrone Tracy. That Trey Benson, Kendre Miller group. Woof. Those are a couple guys that are moving backwards on early camp news in a big way. I did get Miller here 30 picks after ADP at the moment that I took him. His ADP is going to settle more in the 175 range at this point. It's tough. You guys have seen me take a lot of Kendre Miller so far this offseason. He's a guy I was really into. It's one of those things where, it's just frustrating to hear that he showed up to camp and wasn't ready to go, got hurt right away, didn't take care of his body, whatever you want to say. I don't know what you want to say about it. You could say it's on, bad luck or whatever. Clearly his coach feels like he did do enough in the offseason because the very first day, Dennis Allen's like, you got to be healthy to make the team. He's already talking about, if this guy can't get on the field, then we're going to cut him. That's why Miller's price is dropping. I do think at a certain point you still can take him, although I'm overexposed and I'm not trying to get even more exposed to him. But I took him here at pick 175 because I do think there's still upside cases if he can get out there and play. But yeah, I mean, one of those things when you're identifying this guy that the whole backfield is wide open for him. It's a talent-based, youth-based play. He's a 22-year-old. I think the market often misses that when guys come in at age 21, they're not expected to be absolute superstars at age 21 always. They're very, very young, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to develop when you're that much younger. People just think about NFL experience. So people think about rookie year player. And then they also love to mock when you're Kyle Pitts is younger than Dalton Kincaid and stuff like that. But that's a real fact. Dalton Kincaid put together his prospect profile at the college level at an age where Kyle Pitts was already playing at the NFL. But we're already out on Kyle Pitts, who's still 23 years old, by the way. This guy's super young. People love to how many times are you going to say that? Well, I mean, I don't know, as long as it takes for people to actually understand that he's 23 years old. This dude's not going to retire next year. Anyway, Kendre Miller being 21 and failing last year was a meaningful part of the play for me as well. You hope a guy going into his age 22 season in a backfield like that where they were, and I think one of the interesting things you can say about the Dennis Allen quote is that part of the thesis was like they were planning to rely on him. They didn't add to the backfield. They had Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams. Both those guys weren't great last year as rushers, especially. Alvin Kamara's peripherals really declining. Jamal Williams just doesn't look good anymore. And they didn't add anyone. So they're thinking that day two guy they took last year who's going into his age 22 season is going to be a meaningful part of the backfield. Like that was the play. The fact that Dennis Allen is so frustrated right away that this guy can't stay healthy, that, whatever, didn't show up, didn't do enough stretching in the offseason, didn't show up ready to work and not immediately pull his hamstring. A little bit of that to me was almost validation of the part of the thesis that was like, well, their offseason moves suggest they're trying to count on this guy, or at least that was my biased read, that they're frustrated for a reason. They wanted to be able to count on him, and they aren't able to. But yeah, I don't know that you can do anything other than be very cautious about him going forward. So the Trey Benson stuff, they're talking up Emery Demercado, the other backup there, specifically about his third down work, about some of the offseason work he's done to get in good shape. It's not like Benson's going to have more competition for the RB2 role than challenging James Conner for the RB1 role. And then I take Tyrone Tracy here, who at least is getting some buzz, but another guy who could basically be a zero. So this is a 5 running back build where usually when I take Bijan, I would stop at 5, but there's a real argument for me taking a 6th running back, especially like if Raheem Mostert is, considered to be somewhat fragile. Although if I'm drafting him to stay healthy, hopefully. But Benson, Kendre, Tyrone Tracy not providing a ton of support to this build at this particular moment. The way I would look at this is, yes, I drafted these guys, so yes, I'm assuming that they're going to do something for me. But there's the outcomes where all of them are good are limited. I do think I have to assume that I hit something out of this trio of backs, but I think at this point I also have to assume that I'm going to hit something, and then I'm also going to not hit somewhere else in this trio of backs. Maybe the third one is somewhat helpful, but not a huge benefit. And so if I do have sort of a 0 here, I should already start thinking through this as a 4-man build in some ways. Let's see if I can get away with the 7 receiver build here. Nico, Zay, another one where I took Zay ahead of ADP. Again, I promise I don't do that everywhere. Jaden Reed, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison's the wide receiver 5 here. I take him at 79. Again, because I've done this and I've talked about this on recent streams, but basically I believe that at this pick, he still has some meaningful upside, even if he is suspended. It's tricky to hear that his suspension, Sam Sherman did great research on this, his suspension could come in weeks 15 to 17. That would be pretty disastrous. I took Adonai Mitchell. I took Wan'Dale Robinson. I took DJ Chark. Oh, I already have 8 receivers. Okay. So I added Chark to Herbert. I think 8's fine. I don't think I need to go any more. I don't think I need to go to 9 in this build. I got Chark tied to Herbert. I got Flowers tied to Lamar. I have Nico as a bring back. I don't know if I have a New England bring back, but c'est la vie. Brock Bowers and Luke Musgrave. That's not they're both week 10 buys. It's not the best tight end room at all. And it's also, who is Daniel Helm, and when did he get a 210 ADP at the top of the queue? I don't even see a team here. Somebody explain to me who Daniel Helm is. Literally don't know that name. I just clicked over to tight end for those listening along, and Daniel Helm is at the top of the queue. He's a dude for the 49ers that's 29 years old out of Duke. Why does he have a 210.7 ADP? That's weird. Anyway, Daniel Helm, Darius Anderson, Marquise Goodwin. This is like it's a wild thing where a couple dudes with 0-point projections have shot up in the ADP room right now for some reason. So anyway, I think I'm just going to accept my 0 in week 10 at tight end and keep this as a 2 tight end build. I think the 2 options, I could take like a Dulcich or something, which would be somewhat interesting. I think the 2 options are grab Daniel Jones, because I have Wan'Dale and I have Adonai Mitchell as a bring back. I have Tyrone Tracy. It would give me a 3rd QB. But with Lamar, I don't think I really need to go QB. I think that the other option is a running back. Looks like Deneric Prince, who's one of the guys I really like to take right now. I was just mentioning that. I think this guy's going to rise. I think he's going to settle in like round 14 if he continues to even mix in with the twos, because the athleticism is real. He's a 216-pound back, 4.4 yards per carry. We got somebody in the chat saying Underdog bugging for sure. They're at their offsite, like all the guys who, all the people who work for Underdog are at like a company retreat right now. They announced today Bill Belichick new show. Underdog is absolutely crushing it right now. But so we'll have to give him a little bit of a pass for not being like super on top of this minor bug where Helm last played a snap for the Raiders in 2021. Kevin tells us that's Brandon's accountant, as he mentions. Paul says if this is the sprint, ADPs change based on a single draft because volume of drafts is so low. So you're telling me that somebody drafted Darius Anderson and Marquise Goodwin, and whatever a Daniel Helm is, Brandon's accountant. I mean, that might have happened. They might have actually been drafted, but I'd be surprised if all three of those guys were drafted. Anyway, this guy took Deneric Prince, who I do think is a strong pick at this point. I think you're going to get CLV on this guy. I'm not certain about it. He might even be a 0. So I understand why some people are worried about it. I think a lot of the running backs at the late rounds can be 0s. And I think we don't sometimes react to news and evidence quick enough. One of the things I think he has working in his favor with the size and speed element is like the potential for him to do some kick returning, possibly. Maybe I'm wish casting. He did a little bit of that in college. Paul thinks maybe one taint draft added all those schmucks. That's possible. Let's do a little Deneric Prince news chasing. I like clicking. I like doing a little news run while I'm live. I'll read some things and then tell you guys what I'm reading. There's just a bunch of questions about who is the RB2 for the Chiefs. The other big part of that is that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we kind of know is not somebody that's going. I mean, he knows the offense and all of those things, but he's probably not somebody that is a dynamic enough player that, like, if Prince is even in the equation for the RB2, if we know he's going to make the team, if we know he's that other guy, then I'm willing to bet that, like, if Pacheco were to miss significant time, that Prince could be the one that would then win out, right? There's still uncertainty. We're still talking about uncertainty. But then, yeah, I do think as we get more and more buzz about him in the backfield and on that kind of a thought that he might be the most athletic and talented player other than Pacheco, I do think his price eventually rises. People get more and more comfortable picking him. People get more used to seeing him go in drafts, so they start taking him around earlier and earlier. There's a lot of picks that are going right now that might be 0s, right? We're just talking about Kendre Miller. He might get cut too. But the possible upside, I think, is there. Will Shipley, another big one, goes one pick before me. Another one that I would have justified taking there. And so the pick is maybe Dylan Laube, who I've taken like once or twice. I do have a Brock Bowers pick in here. I guess it's sort of a and I have a Kendre Miller bring back. So I have a little bit of a New Orleans Vegas thing going on. It's let's take him. It's sort of saying that like Devontae Adams isn't good or gets traded or something, right? And so then and Laube has to earn, some passing down work, but you're talking about a situation where the rookies are both getting on the field and playing a lot and getting a lot of passing work. I think those two things do correlate a little bit. I want to get a little bit of exposure to Laube. I think it makes sense in a situation where I have Bowers, because I think I'm kind of betting on, in the same direction in some of the outcomes for the Raiders season there. Do I love it in the sprint? I don't know, but it gives me another out at running back with these rookies that, give me a spike week in weeks 15 to 17, kind of an idea, I guess. Let's go back a little bit. Yeah, I think Labby's a better pick on DK on the full PPR site there. Angus here says, since computers are already so dominant in other sports like chess, will computer ever become the best ball player? No, I absolutely do not believe that. I have strong opinions on it, and I shared them in a stream where I said that the draft caddies will never become GTO. You have to go to the YouTube landing page and search through it says overlays can't reach GTO plus who wins in the Texans wide receiver room. Streamed that one a month ago, gave a lot of thoughts on this topic. Go watch that sucker at youtube.com/@stealingsignals, which is where you are right now, I assume. Let's see. What else do we got? Kendre Slide. What's up, Kevin? Kendre Slide makes me hate more and more that Taysom is only QB eligible in Underdog. Yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill probably going to factor in again. The guy will not die. Who are this year's PPR cheat codes? Adam Thielen for some of last year and Waddle was rookie season. I mean, Diontae Johnson, who can't catch apparently, we were just talking about, is definitely the first one that comes to mind. The Broncos running backs are the first ones that come to mind. They're going to catch a ton of balls collectively. Let's go look at my projections. I'll just go sort my projections by receptions. Oh, a guy named Christian McCaffrey leads my running back projection receptions. Let's see. Who late am I giving abnormal receiving volume to at running back? I got Zeke catching 34 balls. Yikes. Javonte is definitely a big one. You're talking receiver more, though, so let me go look over there. PPR cheat codes. Christian Kirk is going to catch a number of balls. He's not like a late round cheat code. Wan'Dale Robinson. Wouldn't surprise me if he caught a bunch of balls and people are like, oh, he's not that good. He's just a PPR cheat code. What about tight end? I mean, obviously, Evan Ingram. He was second in the NFL in receptions. Second all-time in tight end receptions last year. Juwan Johnson has a shot to be kind of a big volume guy underneath for the Saints. Not a massive guy, but he's my favorite late-round tight end at the moment. I'm trying to get as much of him as I can. I think the optimal for me right now is a 2 tight end build with an elite tight end and then Juwan Johnson late. I was thinking about that last night. I get these ideas and I'm like, man, I wish I could go build that in a fast draft, but I can't. Like I can't like implement these ideas quickly. So I tell you guys, and then you guys can go kind of try to draft those teams. All right, let's jump into another BBM here. All right, let's go through the questions. That's right. PPR cheat codes. Oh, somebody mentioned Wan'Dale in the chat. Helm last played. Yeah, we did the Helm stuff. All right. Ben says if Kendre Miller was a free agent, I think I'd have 100% of him in the 15th round. Opinions. I mean, 100% is a bold claim because a lot of the guys that do get cut and land in other places don't ever factor into the new place's plans, really. But certainly, if Kendre Miller did actually get cut by the Saints, the possibility of him landing with like the Cowboys or something would be very exciting. Yes, I can understand why that could actually be viewed as a positive in some ways. TJ says, where do you get news? Is it just Twitter? I mean, Twitter, The Athletic, think you can just Google names sometimes and try to find, the different local newspapers and things. But this is not my skill set. This is why I like hearing what you guys are hearing. I like having these two-way conversations because, some of the guys I do shows with, Sean Siegel, Pat Kerrane, Pete Overzet, all of them are way more plugged in and have better processes. I've asked them other processes. They've tried to explain them. I have a hard time replicating them. It's just like, it's not my skill set to do the amount of reading and the amount of research that is necessary when I'm also like, this time of year, my mind's always moving in terms of like creating stuff. I want to write, I want to do all this stuff, but I need the information from camp. So, it's a good question. And I think there's a lot of people who are sort of just waiting for the people who check the news to write about what they think is important, but it's very valuable to go look it up yourself. And yet I think this is a very common question that even for me, I'm like, I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for a couple years. Like, I'll just be completely honest. Like, I do not integrate news as well as I should. In some cases, I think that's a feature, not a bug, because some of the news gets you off the longer view perspective of the player profile and who they actually are and what they can become. Anyway, it's a good question. That's what Luke McCaffrey as a PPR scam is an interesting one from the consigliere. Yeah, Ben mentioned hyperbolic, but the upside he'd have going to the Cowboys or Chargers, any of these ugly backfields. He also said the Ben's only best ball stream, since I keep pulling up all of his comments. Look, you got a good name. It catches my eye. I don't know what to tell you. Are we believing into the Theo Johnson conversations? Not really. Like, just a couple days ago, I was actually trying to convince myself that Daniel Bellinger might have some upside. Now I'm just like, I don't want any part of that. Hey, Benjamin May, what's up, man? How you doing? Another Ben here for the meeting. Listen, we're an all Ben system around here. If your name's not Ben, that is rough. All right, let's make another pick here. I don't even remember what draft this is. Let's go look at it. Best Ball Mania. 2-4-7-2. We got Jordan Love and Cousins, and then we have Pitts and Musgrave on the back end. It's double stacked, or it is stacked with the QB and tight end. We have that doubled. We have a triple stack for Jordan Love. I've talked about this a little bit with the Packers, where they're kind of a better and best ball team, and you want to just get as much of them as you can get, kind of. Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. Watson well behind ADP at pick 79. I get Wicks, I get Musgrave, I get all that with Jordan Love. I'm loving it. I didn't even mean to do that. That was embarrassing. Kirk Cousins with Bijan and Pitts. At running back, we got Bijan, Mostert, Javonte, and Bucky. Another Bijan team where I ended up with Mostert as my RB2. That's kind of fascinating. With Javonte as the RB3, and then Bucky is a RB4 I really like. This is definitely not a 6 running back build. I mean, I think you could argue a 4 running back build. But we're in the 16th, and this is like the Love Cousins thing's probably a fine 2 QB build. The Pitts Musgrave's definitely a fine 2 tight end build. We have Waddle, Diggs, Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins as the 4. Not great. Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Rashad Bateman. We definitely need to add wide receiver firepower into this late round build. Jalen McMillan and DJ Chark went the 2 picks before me. I would like to file a complaint. I want those guys on my team. We talked a little bit about Jalen Tolbert. I'm not opposed to just saying screw it and going and getting a player that, very well could be a 0. If you want me to sell you on him. Probably just not going to be any good, but has the potential to be something of note. I think there's an argument for a 3rd QB when you have Cousins out there. I don't think I have to go to a 3rd QB. Just kind of looking through the options there. And they're not great. It's basically Will Levis, because I have DeAndre Hopkins, and I could do it with Christian Kirk. Oh, I have Javonte Williams. I could do a Bo Nix with Javonte. Sorry, that sneeze was coming on slowly for like 5 minutes. Marvin Mims just went. I would love to have been able to grab Mims, but I just took Bucky. I would love to take a running back with this pick as well as my RB5. Khalil, Braylon Allen, Tyrone Tracy, Deneric Prince, Roshan Johnson. All guys I'd be, content taking. But it goes down further, right? Like Will Shipley makes sense, etc. And so I don't think the pick's a running back. The thing about the wide receiver pick is if I take Tolbert, it doesn't open anything up. If I take Luke McCaffrey, it doesn't open anything up. I do kind of like McCaffrey. I guess he fits. He's actually a bring back on all the cousin stuff. All right, let's take McCaffrey. I probably lose out on Tolbert. Oh, well, he's an option maybe for the 17 pick. Nix is an option. Luke McCaffrey does give me a little bring back element to the Cousins Bijan thing. I wasn't really thinking about that. Oh, look. All the Bens are here, says Benny. Angus. The number of Bens in the stream is too damn high. Benjamin May says Jonathan Mingo's been mentioned has he been mentioned as a round 18 player yet? His buzz has been good and looks like he'll be ahead of Leggett. He was really, really poor last year, both statistically and to my eye test. I'm not convinced that and it was an opportunity where they needed something. They needed somebody to emerge in some way, which makes it even worse, right? Like the fact that Adam Thielen was doing what he was doing and you couldn't do anything. I understand he's getting buzz. In some spots, I feel comfortable being like, this sounds like we're just trying to talk up a player that we're trying to will it into existence, right? But I was reading this and trying to figure it out. I found my Luke McCaffrey high exposure has been directly tied to how happy I am to draft Bijan, Lennon, and Pitts. He has a great bring back. But yeah, I'm not taking Mingo. I don't think I'll draft him in any drafts this year. I think it's Leggett beating lofty expectations as an early pick, or it's nothing, right? Like it's Diontae Johnson and the passing game's not good. Because I don't think Mingo elevates. I think we learned that enough last year. We're in round 16 here, 2-4-7-2. We got Cousins and Deshaun Watson here. Ramondre, Devin Singletary, Javonte Williams, and Marshawn Lloyd. We got Puka, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Diontae as the wide receiver 4. An ADP value on Jordan Addison. We get Jerry Jeudy and Wan'Dale Robinson. This is a really nice 7 wide receiver build when you get both Jeudy and Robinson as the late guys. I really like both of them at cost. I have Deion Jones in the queue because of the Robinson ad, and I have Singletary. I have Cousins and Watson, so I guess I was thinking, all right, I better go 3 QB build. I have Watson tied with Jeudy. I now have Jones tied with Robinson. This is an eliminator that I clicked on here, so I like to go 3 QBs. I have them all stacked up, different buys, because I have Pitts. Oh, this is a Laporta Pitts team. I already loved this team before I saw that I had 2 elite tight ends. This is a sick build. How did I pull this off? Where am I? I'm at 8. Puka, Adams, Diggs to start. I went Laporta, Pitts, back-to-back 4-5. Got Diontae in the 6th. Ramondre in the 7th. See, when you can get Jordan Addison in the 8th round, that's really helpful. Singletary and Javonte in 9 and 10, and then I get Jeudy in 11. I'm able to get Wan'Dale later. I pushed all the quarterbacks, but still got Cousins, Watson, and Daniel Jones. Grabbed the Marshawn Lloyd share in there. It's a pretty heavy 0 RB build. Ramondre in 7, Singletary in 9. I guess it's not that heavy. I mean, Ramondre in 7, Singletary in 9, Javonte in 10. I ended up with 3 through the 10 rounds. I only have 5 receivers through 10. I got Jeudy in the 11th. Just going to pat myself on the back. This team rules. All right, let's do a couple more eliminator picks. Then we're going to spin the wheel here in a second. 1-5-5-2. So I went with all my receivers. I'm probably done at receiver. Kyler, running backs, excuse me. Jalen Warren, Tyjae Spears, Javonte, Charbonnet, and Jalen Wright. So I really hit that pocket with Warren, Spears, Javonte, and Sharbs. I started Puka Olave, Zay Flowers. I went to Laporta, came back for Godwin in the 5th, took Diontae in the 6th. So 5 receivers in the first 6 rounds, and then I've gone away from the position, obviously, for a while. In the queue, I have a bunch of quarterbacks because I need the quarterback position. Kyler's a week 11 bye. I have Baker at the top of my queue. I don't know if I want to get 2 week 11 buys and an eliminator. I do have Sharbs. I could go Geno. Can't really backstack him. The other option is Derek Carr or Bryce Young later because I do have Olave and I do have Diontae Johnson. I need to draft some wide receivers. I have Michael Wilson starred. I can't do Daniel Jones, as he's affectionately referred to in this one, is another week 11 bye. Bryce Young is a week 11 bye. So Derek Carr suddenly becomes pretty meaningful to this build. A Bo Nix type as a week 14 bye with Javonte would be pretty interesting. I don't know why I have my queue filled with. I don't want Baker or Bryce Young. They're not high enough upside, and they match the buy of my QB. And then I have to Michael Wilson's in my queue here because I thought about adding him to receiver. But again, this is an eliminator where I already have Chris Godwin and Diontae Johnson, which is why I was looking at those QBs. But they both have week 11 buys. Adding Michael Wilson as the 3rd week 11 buy in my wide receiver room in an eliminator, and Greg Dortch. I don't have Kyler even stacked in this. I was going to backstack him, but then I'm going to probably just play Kyler unstacked in this, which I don't think is insane, but is not ideal. Which brings me back to wide receiver, where suddenly I want like Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, and then to hit Bo Nix. That's the way that I think I should set up the later rounds in this build. But to get them, or one of them, plus Carr, plus Nix, and the quarterbacks do tend to go higher in these eliminators because everyone wants to get 3. So I don't even know if I can bank on the 17th round being a spot where I could get Nix. It's a little ahead of his ADP. I would have to take Carr in the 16th, well ahead of his ADP, and one of those Denver receivers in the 15th. But Carr could even go by then. I almost think I should take Carr in the 15th, Nix in the 16th, which means I should almost take a Denver receiver with this pick. And I don't think it's that crazy. This is not that big of a different tier. What you guys are hearing me now is kind of working back to front through the rest of my draft. If I do this and overdraft the rest of this stuff to get my quarterbacks lined up in a meaningful way, get that 6th receiver right now, I'd be reaching on somebody by quite a bit. And then it leaves me with a 17 and an 18 pick at the very end that are not going to be friendly picks, especially at wide receiver, which I'll still need receivers. And it's not fun to be taking receivers that late. The ideal way to do this is to take like a Demario Douglas or something right now. Just get something else into this build. I don't know what I would take here because I don't think Pearsall makes a lot of sense in the eliminator. I don't think Quentin Johnston does at this point either. And these other guys have week 11 buys. I love Wan'Dale Robinson. Michael Wilson stacked, but I don't want to be taking week 11 buys. Maybe it's DeMarcus Robinson. I don't know. But I have Puka on this team too. The ideal way would be to take a receiver like that, then be able to get the Denver receiver next round, get the quarterback still later, get Nix in 17. If all that fell perfectly, then I only have to figure out my round 18 pick as like that last flyer receiver instead of 2 late picks. The problem is I don't have a lot of margin for error because the other late round quarterbacks that I would consider, a couple of them are week 11 buys, which I already have with Kyler. That's Bryce Young and Daniel Jones. It wouldn't be the end of the world, even in an eliminator in a 3 QB build, if I match 2 of them with the same buy. It's thin, but it's not. I just need the other QB to do well that week. It's not the end of the world. Trying to think if I should go hyper aggressive with a Bronco wide receiver pick here. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with this. Once we get through about 150 players, I don't think anything is a reach since you're really just filling the roster. Completely agree. The bigger point is if I do this plan in 14, 15, and 16, then the other two picks that aren't a part of what's in my queue right now wind up as 17 and 18 picks. If I navigate it more carefully, I could take a different pick here in 14 that is a massively higher tier and try to get lucky and still get those picks. They would all be still ahead of ADP in rounds 15, 16, and 17. And so it really changes whether I have two flyers at the very end or just one, really changes the build. And I think with a lot of these, we're doing so many of these drafts. With a lot of these drafts, you do kind of want to give yourself the out to hitting the nuts with your draft. And even if I don't hit the nuts with the QBs, I could still do, a Daniel Jones or a Bryce Young. If like Bo Nix goes too early, I can still try to grab QBs in rounds 16 and 17 through a different avenue and match the week 11 bye. So I'm kind of talking through like how aggressive I want to be to make sure this pans out the way I want. The other thing I do is just take Geno Smith right now. I have the Charbonnet pick because I don't like the receivers right now, which is kind of weird, but it sets me up a lot more outs in the 3 QB build. Now, it's an eliminator. Like I don't have him stacked with a receiver either, and I don't have Kyler stacked with a receiver. But it is like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you want to think about the week 17 stuff, but you also want to think about advancing all season. I'm a little less concerned about like hyper stacking. I'm going to take Geno. I think there's some full season correlations with Sharps where you're saying, okay, Ken Walker gets banged up. Sharps' value rises and the pass rate rises. I think that like in the ADP range we're in, addressing quarterback here in a kind of a creative way with a QB running back stack, pushing the wide receiver stuff, seeing if I can navigate the Denver stack or just going to Derek Carr later, not really making myself need to go Daniel Jones or Bryce Young with the week 11 thing. I think that was the right move, particularly because the top of the queue wide receivers aren't guys I really wanted to take. So this is a situation where I think I can press down here and take other wide receivers that I want to take. I'm throwing them into the queue now, like a Jalen McMillan, a Luke McCaffrey, a DJ Chark, or, whatever. I'll try to hit, Jalen Tolbert. I'll try to hit a few of these guys later on. We'll see how that draft develops. That is a fun one to think through. Here's another eliminator, 2572. We're in the 17th round. Got Watson and Derek Carr is all. My QBs are picked through. It's really like Bryce Young. That's a 16-game starter. Maybe Drake May as an option. But in the eliminator where, 2/3 of the field is eliminated by week 5, I'm really worried about that week 1 starting potential when it comes to a pick like May. 5 running backs, Bijan and Brian Robinson, Tyjae Spears, Marshawn Lloyd, J.K. Dobbins, who I'm taking more in these eliminators because, I'm worried about the efficiency, but it seems like the workload's actually going to be solid, and it's less of a long-term play where, again, a lot of these eliminator teams are going to be eliminated right away. So part of the equation is just get you through the early going. Even though this is a Bijan team with a Brian Robinson pick as well, you're hoping that Marshawn Lloyd's a late season hit and all those things when things get a little trickier. But you want to get there. And I'll probably take another scratch off running back in this build. I guess what I'm saying is I think about the J.K. Dobbins pick as if it opens up the ability to take like a Deneric Prince or something, where if Dobbins can help me get to week 7 or week 8 by having some decent volume early on and some usable weeks, even if he doesn't go for the whole season, just getting your eliminator down the line a little bit is somewhat valuable. And then if Deneric Prince in week 7 or week 8, Isaiah Pacheco happens to have a season-ending injury, which, I'm not trying to wish that on somebody, but this is what happens with handcuffs. We do have to talk about that kind of thing. Deneric Prince's value skyrockets, and suddenly he's the key piece the rest of the way. But you don't get it there if you don't have the J.K. Dobbins pick. It's sort of the way that I'm thinking through that. Layering points throughout different parts of the season, right? Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. Pretty fun wide receiver build. Don't love Sutton, but sometimes they'll just grab him in there, especially like in an eliminator. Stable veteran pick. It's a high number for a guy that I don't see as having real ceiling, like big ceiling. Kyle Pitts and Juwan Johnson. There's the tight end thing. Although this is an eliminator, and I matched my buys at my tight end spot. That's fantastic. Fantastic. Dude, Tyler, am I coming around to McMillions yet? Yeah, you got me, man. I'm coming around. I said pre-draft that if one of the secondary UW receivers had real ceiling, it would be Jalen McMillan. It wouldn't be Jalen Polk. In fact, let's go drafts completed. Pre-draft best ball exposure, wide receiver, 31% Jalen McMillan. This thing that, like, I said one time as I was like kind of giving a scouting report this offseason that he was kind of unreliable as far as UW receivers go. I wasn't super in on him, but when I did more research into his actual analytical profile, the targets per out run stuff, thought through the ways that he actually wins and how that could translate, I got pretty into Jalen McMillan pretty quick. I'm not taking a ton of him, but yeah, I wouldn't classify myself as out on McMillan, but if you watch Ship Chasing, that's, I think, whenever we talk about it, it seems like that's the opinion or the memory on that player. That kind of stuff happens sometimes. Anyway, 2572 here. I got to figure out if I want to take a third tight end or just let week 12 be a 0 at the position in an eliminator. I think that's going to be tough to survive. Oh, that's gross. I only have 2 more picks. I do like 7 wide receivers. I do like the receiver room enough. I think I need another running back, and I really think I need another quarterback. I guess I could let the running backs just fly and say maybe J.K. Dobbins plays all year. Maybe Brian Robinson plays all year. Tyjae Spears and Lloyd provide some upside. And really, the bet on this build is Bijan Robinson more than anything. So I could go QB tight end and make it a 3-5-7-3. I think the pick here, I don't think Deshaun Watson and Derek Carr are stable enough to win in an eliminator. And I don't think Bryce Young's fixes that, but I think if you give yourself 3 outs at QB, you give yourself 3 outs at QB every week, and the best ball, you're hoping the best ball element sort of works in your favor, that you're getting at least a floor every week and some spike games scattered, and they're not happening the same week. Each of these guys might only have a few spike weeks all season, right? But, Deshaun Watson, maybe a few more. But if Derek Carr and Bryce Young each have 2 or 3 and Watson has 4 or 5 and they never fall in the same week, suddenly I could maybe have 10 spike weeks and you're just getting fortunate. I don't have Bryce Young stacked here. I could consider Jatavian Sanders as my week 12 tight end option. That's probably the way to do it. I also put Michael Mayer in there. I think he's probably the best late round tight end option. Like that late after Juwan Johnson's gone, who's already on my team. Because I think Michael Mayer's going to play. I think they're going to run some 12 personnel. They don't have a third receiver. Michael Gallup retired. It's that return man that's probably their third guy, Trey Tucker or whatever. No, Trey Tucker's Trey Tucker. I always get him in the Chargers ones mixed up. Who's the Chargers dude that I'm thinking of? Darius Davis. They both have alliterative names. But Trey Tucker is going to be the wide receiver 3, I think, for them. Not really earn a ton of volume and probably not play a ton. I think they'll probably do a lot of 12 personnel, play Mayer and Bowers together with Adams and Jacoby Myers, and suddenly that's a pretty fun receiving room. All right. This was, what was it, a sprint? Let's jump into it. We got Deshaun Watson and Geno. We got 3 running backs, Bijan, Mostert, and Nick Chubb at a 139 pick. slot. He's going to start rising again from there. So whatever. I got a little bit of exposure to him. Also, as a bring back on this Miami stuff, I have Mostert and I had Waddle. Waddle, Diggs, Keenan, JSN, Addison, Judy, and Downs, Kincaid, Bowers, sick tight end room. Love Bowers in the sprint. It's the kind of profile, late season, breakout ceiling, right? Like if I can pair Bowers with a guy that I think is a little bit more stable than get me there, and Bowers is not actually overly represented in the sprint because he's a rookie that took has had some up and down periods, and for the people who drafted him as a tight end one, he doesn't necessarily get there. But then in the sprint, Dalton Kincaid is a really high advance rate player, and he has, a good game or two. But Bowers has some monster late season upside in the sprint. I get 3 shots at it, and I think his profile is very ripe for the kind of back-weighted production we know that rookie pass catchers can give you. Just love the setup of him in a sprint outcome. So that's a fun one. Waddle, Diggs, Keenan, JSN, Addison, Judy, Downs is a really nice 7-man receiver room. I'm good there. Watson and Geno, same buy. So definitely not enough at quarterback. Which begs the question of what I plan to do for QB3. I don't really have I'm not adding a tight end. I'm not adding a wide receiver, and I don't really have another name. So we're just going to put Bo Nix out there because he usually makes some sense. Kendre Miller has fallen to pick 174. Bucky Irving, always a guy that I'm looking at here. But if I'm going to play Bo Nix, I might have to do Audric Estime. Got a couple of running back picks coming up. I guess Kendre opens up Derek Carr. All right, I'm going to take Kendre Miller. I could do a QB running back stack with Brock Bowers as the bring back. Let's go into, it's a sprint, so the week 17 bring back's not the only bring back, but it's still a part of it. It's 1/3 of the bring backs. 2, 4, 6, 2 here in a marathon. So this one, the bring backs don't matter at all. We got Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams. We got Raheem Mostert, Chase Brown, Ty Chandler, Ray Davis. We got Jamar Chase, Debo, Diggs, Keenan Allen, JSN, Josh Downs. God, clean 6 receivers. Good players, all of them. Trey McBride and George Kittle. Oof. It was a double elite tight end build with those receivers. And I still got Mostert, Chase Brown, Ty Chandler, and Ray Davis. This is the type of marathon team that can win, in my opinion. They can win the whole thing. Ton of wide receiver firepower that can really score. 2 really dynamic tight ends. And Mostert stays healthy. Chase Brown is a breakout we know he can be. Ty Chandler winds up a big part of the Vikings passing or rushing attack. Ray Davis layers in some usable weeks, some rushing TDs, some of that stuff in the Latavius Murray role. Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams gives you some real quarterback upside. I got Purdy with Debo and Kittle, so it's a very directional bet on the Niners offense, and I guess also on Brandon Ayuk not playing a ton this year, whether he's held out or traded or something, or maybe just having a down year because of the contract negotiations and all that stuff. They've been asking the team about that lately. I saw it in a press conference because Debo referenced it the year that he was in negotiations well into the season, that hurt his offseason process and made him worse during that regular season. They were asking if if the team is worried about that happening to Ayuk. Keenan Allen with Caleb Williams. Nothing else with Caleb Williams as of yet. Only 6 receivers. Could add to that. This is a marathon. Jalen Wright is the pretty clear running back pick, but Mostert is a pretty big bet on this team. And so I don't think Wright makes a ton of sense. The late Bears running backs are directional bets, I think, that make some sense with Caleb. So we're making some... I really like in the marathon making these big stacked offensive bets, right? Like I don't mind going double stack Debo, Kittle. Like I think sometimes in like BBM and stuff we're overstacking maybe. But in terms of like total points, I don't know. I don't know how to explain this, but I guess I'm thinking your quarterbacks have to be really high scoring the whole year. The offenses have to be right. You might as well be pretty hyper stacked on them. I think one of Herbert or Roschon would be a nice RB6 here. The question is the RB5. Is it Bucky Irving right now? And then the other question is the wide receiver. So I have 4 picks left. I could go 3 QB, even though I like the Purdy and Caleb stuff. I could wind up with a 3-6-7-2 here. And I like these first 6 receivers enough that 7 would be fine. I'm not going more than 2 tight ends. I could go 7 running backs as well, but I don't think I'm going to need to. So the pick could be Wan'Dale Robinson and set up a Daniel Jones pick. But I don't know that Daniel Jones actually makes it back to 189. He's got a 179 ADP. I still need a 6th receiver at some point, and Wan'Dale's a good pick. Probably could still be a 2 quarterback build. I'm going to take the 7th receiver here, close out my receivers. The possibility that Daniel Jones comes back is on the table. If he doesn't, I probably go with 3 straight running backs late and go 2-7-7-2 with this build, I think. But we shall see how that one develops. That's a fun one as well. We got the sprint here. Let's jump into this. I have Herbert in the queue, and he's behind ADP here. So let's take a peek. We got Dak. We got Devon Achane and Chase Brown. We got a Lamb, Devonta, Keenan Allen, Diontae Johnson, Ladd McConkey, Brandon Cooks pick. I don't take a lot of Cooks, but when I do, it's when I have Lamb and I have Dak, Trey McBride, and Brock Bowers. Man, that is such a sick room for the sprint. Another one where I executed that strategy I was just talking about a minute ago. Definitely excited to see that. Let me just talk about how awesome I am some more. Yeah, man, getting Ladd in the 7th year is really nice. And it's why I put Herbert in the queue. I only have Achane and Chase Brown, but like I'm not that concerned about running back. I'm going to take Herbert to put with Dak. The other pick at this turn is probably a running back. I don't know. Maybe it's Algier. Maybe it's like Ray Davis. I mean, Kendre Miller's there. I don't know how I'm going to play that. The running back room definitely needs a little bit of work, but the rest of this build looks really nice. We are caught up. Let's go to the wheel of names. Let's actually look at the chat a little bit. We had Benny said Watson's one of the most annoying to try to gauge on Twitter because it's a healthy mix of Browns fans showing highlights and Watson haters showing lowlights. Nice to see both sides of someone. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a bigger spotlight on some players as well. And that's one of those things that I do think is important to think about when you think about camp. Like there are certain players that are going to have a bigger spotlight on them. Quentin Johnston, for example, had a really tough rookie year. Every mistake he makes is going to get highlighted. I'm not in on him, but every mistake he makes is going to get highlighted. It's just natural. As other players are just like not going to be highlighted as much for one reason or another. It doesn't mean that their path throughout an NFL season matters that much. We're just all starved for information. You want to pay attention to the information. You don't want to overreact to everything, right? Bowers in all formats for sure. Where are you at in the Moss versus Brown exposures? Any adjustment to your take? I have not really adjusted much. I'm in on Brown. I've been higher on Brown. I've taken some Moss. That's all. Like, this is a great example of where I'm not really worried about the early camp stuff, other than it's nice to hear that they're both in the mix to play with the first team, right? Like, I would be concerned if the report was Chase Brown's not even in the mix, right? Because that was one of the little minor concerns on him. The fact that they're talking about he could be in the mix, and then a lot of people pushing back like, no, Zach Moss is definitely going to play on passing downs and get short yardage and stuff. And I'm like, look, Chase Brown got 50 touches last year, 53, I think. I was just concerned that he would be involved. And the fact that he's involved and they're not saying like doing like, hey, a Travion Williams sighting, early in camp, I think is bullish, because like the other part of it is like, we're just betting on Chase Brown's talent over Zach Moss's talent throughout the NFL season, not in week 1, like by week 8, right? Like that's going to be evident on the field. So no, I'm not, there's nothing in camp that has adjusted my take. I've taken Moss too. Collectively, you want both. Like you definitely want a piece of this backfield. It's a low key, really strong, high value touch backfield. Joe Burrow is a good passer to the running backs, which is a stat that, or like a thing that we don't talk about enough. But and this offense does it a lot. Even Jake Browning took over and did it even more. But Burrow's always given his running backs really high catch rates and like a decent number of targets, and they've caught a lot of passes. It's not just the target side, it's the reception side especially. It's part of why I look at the high value touches from the reception side and not the target side, is some quarterbacks actually get the ball out to them effectively, and other quarterbacks consistently don't. They're just like firing it at their feet. And so, yeah, that's a boost for the Bengals when you're looking at it from a receptions perspective. It's like they catch like 80+% of their targets out of the Bengals backfield, most of them almost every year of their career. Like we could go look at, let's just go look at that. So I'm not just making these claims. Let's go look at Joe Mixon. Receiving catch rate, 81% last year, 80%, 87, 80. This is an extended thing, right? You got to go all the way back to 2019 to see the last time he was below 80. The average for a running back is about 75. There's a lot of offenses where like every running back in the offense, I can tell you this from projections, every running back in the offense is below 75. They're like 72%, 70%. That 10 percentage point gap in catch rate does matter for the fantasy scoring of a backfield. Let's go to Samaje Perine, who was obviously in Denver last year, but prior was in Cincinnati. His last year there, 74.5%, closer to average, but the year prior was 87.1. The year prior to that was 91.7. He got 11 out of 12. So that was actually not, that's a little bit of a misleading number. But the 87%, for example, 27 of 31 he caught out of the backfield last year. We can go to Chase Brown last year. I think he caught 14 out of 15. Yep, 14 out of 15, 93%. Obviously, a lot of that was from Browning, so it's not the greatest sample. Who are the other backs in this backfield that I'm forgetting? Travion Williams, I guess. Mixon was at 81%. Chase Brown caught 14 of 15. Travion caught 7 of 9 for 78%. Let's see Travion's career. He's never really done a lot, but 15 of 19 over the course of his career. He's caught 79% of his career targets. Yeah, it's just a thing in this backfield. So another reason, I think it's a low-key reason why you need to be in on them overall to this question. And I do take some Zach Moss. Angus says if the Debo offseason contract analogy is true, or we're at all about Lamb still holding out. I don't necessarily think it's true. I'm saying that there's already beat writers asking about those types of things, and I'm not worried about Lamb. It's a very different scenario to me where in the Ayuk case, it's like, well, we have a lot of other really good players that we can focus on, and we can let Ayuk ramp up to speed if he's, whatever. Doesn't practice until week 1. Let's say he signs or doesn't sign or whatever, but he's on the field week 1. He's ready to play, but he hasn't practiced all offseason. Do you think they're going to use him really heavily in week 1, or do you think they are, going to bring him along slowly? That would be the concern for me, is that they bring him along slowly because they have Debo, because they have all those guys. The Cowboys are not going to bring along CeeDee Lamb slowly. They don't have that. We're getting a bunch of Cades. We got the world's biggest Cade Stover fan here, who's got a Ted Williams avatar. He's this year's Sam Laporta. He's murking, making folks look silly. Stover's the much-needed middle monster Stroud needs. Stover had 0 drops at Ohio State. He's huge, fast, runs crisp routes, and has the best hands on the team. If Cade Stover cracks a rotation that features Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and then obviously has Dalton Schultz there as well, that'll be impressive. When they talked about their tight ends, they brought up Brevin Jordan again. Stover's buried, but that's cool that he looks good at camp. I'm sure you're at camp. This is one of those things where it's like you see this guy and you're like, man, this guy looks awesome. How do they not use him? NFL teams, like, they might bump him up to like 15 targets this year because he had a great camp, but like that kind of stuff's like, you can't actually win a major job. I don't think he's going to be this year's Sam Laporta. The audio got fixed during the wheel. I haven't spun it yet. but I will in a moment. 38% Bears backfield equals, or Bengals backfield equals good. I agree. A lot of buzz on Twitter about a blockbuster trade coming. Any guesses who it might be? I mean, maybe Ayuk. Benny says 0 drops in college, okay, but also less than 100 receptions in college. Okay, we got, I mean, Cade Stover. Is your last name Stover by chance, Uncle Ted? You a family member? Moved from DN to tight end, became co-captain with Stroud. This guy is a Stover believer. He is over the field on Stover. Let's historical anomalies. Key point here: less than 100 receptions, playing with Marv, JSN, Garrett Wilson, and Olave. Are we taking this seriously? There's way too many good target earners for Cade Stover to be a serious thing. Let's spin this wheel. The Las Vegas Raiders. Time to remember some guys. Tyrone Wheatley, Napoleon Kaufman, my Washington Huskies. Late career Jerry Rice did some fun stuff alongside the longer turn Oakland Raider. But look at this, dude. Age 39 and age 40 for Jerry Rice. 83 catches and 92 catches for Oakland. 1,100, 1,200 yards, 16 TDs total over those 2 years. This dude was 40 at the NFL level and still putting up 1,200-yard seasons. Alongside, this is when they went to the Super Bowl right around here with Rich Gannon at QB, alongside Tim Brown, who's the other name you got to mention. Jerry Porter shows up there. Oh man, remember Ronald Curry, one-handed catch in the snow? I wish I could show clips. Go search Ronald Curry, one-handed catch in the snow. The guy was a college quarterback at UNC, played wide receiver for the Raiders for a bit, made a sick one-handed catch on Monday Night Football in a very heavy snowstorm. Tim Brown, very long time Raider, stud, just absolute stud. 80-plus catches starting in 93 through, I guess in 2000 he only had 76. So 75-plus catches for 10 straight years, over 1,000 yards almost every one of those years. Yeah, this guy was an absolute stud. What do we got? What do you guys got? You got Michael Crabtree. Who needs Megatron? Jamarcus Russell. Kerry Collins. Denarius Moore. I like that one. We got Jerry Porter and Rod Streeter. Those are good ones. Ooh, Bo Jackson. Let's get a little Tecmo Super Bowl love. I guess Tecmo Super Bowl's in my closet. I got N64 down there. Love that game. Tim Brown, Jerry Porter. We got Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen, Charles Woodson, Henry Ruggs. Yikes. Rich Gannon, definitely underrated. FF Coder said, when I was building my wide receiver database, I thought I was pulling in data incorrectly from NFL FastStar because of those 2 Rice seasons where he's 39 and he has these monster years. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being a little bit confused on that. 2012 Raiders receiving yardage leader, Brandon Myers, the tight end. Got Ken Stabler, Charlie Garner, Marcus Allen, we mentioned. Can't tackle Bo in Tecmo. Love that guy. Darren Waller, of course. You got Charlie Garner is a name. When I see Oakland and Tampa on Tim Brown's chart, I thought of Charlie Garner, who went Oakland to Tampa. Let's go to their team encyclopedia. They've been all over the place. I love going to the franchise encyclopedia, seeing the leaders at the different positions. You got Rob Streeter on here. Darius Hayward-Bay. Brandon Myers right there. Zach Miller. Tight end Zach Miller. Ronald Curry we have here, I mentioned. Oh, Randy Moss. Led the team in receiving once. An all-time great. Jared Cook, Hunter Renfrow. Got Josh Jacobs, obviously. Late career, Dougie Martin. Marshawn Lynch, Latavius Murray. Early career, Latavius Murray. Got early career, Darren McFadden. Rashard Jennings. Michael Bush. Justin Fargas, Lamont Jordan. You guys remember this Lamont Jordan season? He was kind of sick. This is a team that's been through a lot. Terrell Pryor was a really fun fantasy quarterback that year. I mean, we could remember some guys on this team for a long time. Napoleon Kaufman, shout out to my Husky alum, was sick in the 90s. Didn't have a long career at the NFL level. 1,200 yards in 97. Smaller back, wasn't able to really hold up to the NFL level, but he was really, really good in college as well. Man, the Bo Jackson stuff is just like, he could have been so good. Can't believe he got hurt. Willie Gault, Mervin Fernandez, those are the guys that are they're receivers in Tecmo Super Bowl. If you ever play that game and you ever do pass with the Raiders, you'll be throwing to Willie Gault. This is that's a fun one. Let's go to their team this year. We were talking about Brock Bowers in all formats. The first place I'm going to go is our lads. I was talking about how Michael Mayer might actually play in a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. Look at this receiver room. Trey Tucker is their other guy that's listed as a starter. Behind that, we have Jalen Guyton on PUP. We have Christian Wilkerson. We have DJ Turner. And we got a bunch of other deep guys, Keelan Doss and some UDFAs. I don't know a lot about any of these dudes. This is a really, really thin receiving room behind Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. This is part of why I don't really think Devontae Adams gets traded. It would be kind of wild. But maybe it gets traded in season. I don't know if they kind of decide to pack it up and throw in the towel a little bit. Jacoby could have a solid role behind Adams. I just wonder if there's like real upside there. Adams is the one that like has earned a 30% target share 4 years in a row. And it's just such a monster in those ways. And then you have Bowers landing on top of Michael Mayer, who was a good prospect in his own right. I didn't mean to click on it, but a 2nd round pick. And I mean, their 3rd tight end, Harrison Bryant's like as good as their 3rd receiver. Like, this is a team that's going to use some 12 personnel. I think they clearly are telegraphing they want to run the ball. You got Zamir White. You got Alexander Madison, who did nothing and doesn't have the peripherals. That's why I just took Dylan Laube in a draft a little bit ago, who is a little bit more of a receiving prospect. Sean was just telling me a little bit about him, that he wasn't even that efficient at a small school. He only averaged like 4.5 yards per carry at New Hampshire, which usually, like the whole Danny Woodhead comps that always come up, like Danny Woodhead ran for like 2,700 yards at Chadron State, where he was from in his final year, broke the NCAA record for rushing yards in a season. When Laube's coming out of a small school and only averaging 4.5 yards per carry, that's a very different scenario. Like, you want these guys to be absolutely dominating at those levels. But I think he probably threatens and or displaces Amir Abdullah. There's a lot of really positive stuff about him as well. I'm not trying to knock him. But yeah, I mean, I think you can make a strong case that Zamir White is like undervalued, but I also think there's like a very dead zone-y element to his profile. So let's talk about Zamir and Madison a little bit, and then how that, maybe factors into the Laube stuff. The Madison is like, he's so bad. The way I wrote about Laube recently was like, they might not care that Laube's undersized and all of that stuff. Eventually, like, you might just give Laube the number 2 role because Madison's just not doing it. And I'm not trying to say he's like the worst player in the NFL. You could also make a case that Alexander Madison is a round 18 pick. He's going to get, RB2 work, and is maybe undervalued relative to his workload and as a handcuff and all of those things too. Because I don't think Laube's probably, size-wise, the first bet to be the handcuff. But I do think like Madison can be bad enough that it's possible that Laube just passes him for a backup role. Anyway, I don't think Madison's really going to threaten White. They've talked about Madison as a clear backup. There's not a ton, but if we go to like Zamir White, did some good stuff down the stretch last year. These far right 2 columns, missed tackles, force, yards after contact per attempt. Did that update? I think it did. For Zamir White, like, these are not the yards after contact stuff's pretty good. There's some reason to believe he's decent. Over 3 yards after contact per attempt is pretty good. Missed tackles, force per touch. Madison, The missed tackles for stuff fell off. Yards after contact per attempt lower. Yards per carry has been really poor. I mean, some of these peripherals, that missed tackles forced, like actually look good at some points. But if you're not explosive, you can make guys miss and then not actually gain yards. It can be a little misleading. The yards after contact per attempt is low. This is not great. It's not really breaking through tackles. The yards per carry stuff has been bad 3 years in a row. The yards per target stuff backs it up. It's been bad multiple years in a row. I think you can bet on White potentially, like from an athletic profile. The dude's rocked up, potentially being like the stud in this backfield. I wonder about the overall upside of the whole offense. We're hearing reports. Like my original thought on the Raiders was that AOC and Gardner Minshew both being there would give them like a floor of production. That Aiden O'Connell was pretty good down the stretch last year. This is something that, is, I think, worth, looking at. Like he has so right after Antonio Pierce takes over, Josh McDaniels is fired. They make Aiden O'Connell the starter. He has a rough stretch like through this range in his first few starts of his career. He's a rookie, day 3 pick. But if you look at, like, I would say all 5 of those games are not particularly good. He throws 3 TDs against 5 interceptions. He never throws 300 yards, etc. These final 4 games, that Kansas City game is kind of weird. He goes 9 for 21 in a game. He throws 62 yards in a game they actually won against Kansas City. But they go 3-1 down the stretch. They have the awesome game against the Chargers where they absolutely destroy them on, the game before Brandon Staley got fired. The Chargers kind of quit in this game. And then against Denver in the final game of the season as well, another solid game, 65% completions, 244, 2 TDs. It's not great, but he ends up with 8 touchdowns, 0 picks in his final 4 games, completes nearly 60% of his passes. It's not good, but it's not horrible. Minshew's numbers were pretty solid last year. He's a stable veteran kind of backup, but I do think with Antonio Pierce being the interim coach who takes over, starts O'Connell the whole year, and then gets the full-time job in the offseason, and then they don't address the quarterback position, that developing O'Connell might be their plan. Like they might think this guy with his mustache is the future of the quarterback position for the team. 4th round pick, like did some things okay as a rookie. And so they're like, okay, well, that's the thing we're going to develop. He started as the long shot to start in week 1. I would not be surprised if he actually does start. He's moved and now he's the favorite. But I had thought that having Minshew there meant that if O'Connell failed, you have a degree of stability. He's going to help. Minshew's a kind of quarterback. He played in the spread Mike Leach offense in college. He's been this way his whole NFL career. Where he's not going to be great, but he's going to get the ball out. There's going to be a lot of receptions in the offense. He's going to be accurate enough. He tends to be a lower ADOT guy, but he can process and deliver the ball like he was running that spread offense in college. Get a lot of catchable passes out there so that the offense can actually have some fantasy production. So in terms of like a below average quarterback, there's different types of it. There's ones that tank the offense like a Zach Wilson. And then there's ones that, can at least provide for some fantasy production. I thought having both those guys would elevate the floor of this offense, which was a meaningful thing. Unfortunately, that is not the way that it looks it's going to go, at least the way that camp is, if you believe camp at all. What we're hearing is some real negative stuff. And I will point out again, or not again, but that Aiden O'Connell is also a very old prospect. He was an age 25 rookie last year. But yeah, both O'Connell and Minshew are supposedly struggling early in camp, which is not great for the thesis that the Raiders could actually be worth playing this year. And that is a problem, I think, for Zamir White's upside thesis, who also is older than you would think. He's now, he turns 25 in September. He's 24 already. He had a really nice, so in terms of game logs, we're going to just keep looking at game logs because it's kind of like you stop paying attention to the Raiders down the stretch. So what were they like under Antonio Pierce? Well, Zamir White, the last few games, people have talked about this, 17 carries, 61 yards and a TD with 3 receptions in week 15. Go way to the right column over here, 70% snaps. Prior to that, the week prior, in week 14, he'd only played 9% of the snaps, 5 snaps total. Right. So prior to week 15, Zamir White was not even a part of the offense. He had played more than 7 snaps one time in week 17. He played a little bit in a game they lost 30-12. right? He's otherwise just like a depth back, not even playing as a number 2 guy. And then late in the season, Josh Jacobs is out. They go, all right, Zamir White, you're a 70% snap rate guy in week 15. We get 4 games of that. He has the game I just referenced, then a 22 for 145 rushing game in week 16 against Kansas City in that win where they barely completed any passes. Then in week 17, 20 carries for 71, not very efficient, but he catches 5 passes. And then in week 18, 25 for 112. So you get a stretch here of 4 games where he actually goes for 99.3 yards per game rushing. He adds 2.5 catches per game, or nearly 2.3 catches per game, because there's a 5-catch game in there and a 3-catch game. He also has 0 catches in a game. It's kind of all over the place a little bit. His rushing efficiency is all over the place a little bit. There's only 1 touchdown out of the 4 games. It's like, on one hand, you're like, look, this is good. This is good production for a guy who started 4 straight games, and maybe he'll build off this in the next season. And the team seems to be building off of it. They seem to be running it all back. They bring back Antonio Pierce. They want to run it back with Aiden O'Connell. They want to run it back with Zamir White. That seems to be what they are doing. Chris Diaz says, have you seen the QBs the Raiders played during Zamir White's good run? Was Mahomes not in this game? They played Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of all time, for one of the 4 games. This is an Easton Stick game. This is probably a Gardner Minshew game. Yeah. Who was this? Stidham? So, yeah, they played against Easton Stick and Jarrett Stidham in those games. It's worth noting. Part of why he was able to get 20-plus carries in these games is, the Kansas City game, they just, they went into Kansas City, were able to control the line of scrimmage a little bit, control the they get the Chiefs to punt 3 times early, and then the Chiefs score in the second, a fumble, an interception, a missed field goal, turnover on downs, punt, turnover on downs. Like, the Chiefs' drive results here, the fumble and interception were both on the first play of the drive. See right here, both of those were 1-play drives in the second quarter. And so the Raiders, I mean, they weren't doing anything offensively. They had only made a field goal. In fact, look at their drives. They kicked 2 field goals the whole game. Their drives weren't effective in this game. They ended up winning because they must have gotten 2 return touchdowns. I guess I had forgotten that. But yeah, an interception return in the second round and a fumble return. Both of those 1-play drives were Raiders return touchdowns in the middle of the second quarter, which led to positive game script, which led to only 9 completions and Zamir White rushing 22 times. Obviously, you don't expect the Raiders to be in positive game script in most games, is what I'm saying. They lose to the Colts by 3. They absolutely dominate the Chargers in week 15, and they beat Jarrett Stidham and the Broncos in week 18. And so he averages over 20 carries per game in that stretch where he had 99 yards. And it's not that Zamir White won't be their workhorse. It's that this team won't be in scenarios where they can carry the ball 20 times per game very frequently based on market expectations. And so, yeah, the Zamir White play is tricky. I have a little bit of exposure to him because I do think he could just wind up being kind of good. There's some elements to his profile that are not like horrible, but I'm also, I'm skeptical of a guy who didn't break out until, it wasn't even playing in, as a secondary player in the first 2 years of his career until those last 4 games. And yeah, there was some interesting context in those 4 games. It feels very fragile. This is a team where, if there's a free agent out there that they could pick him up, right? And they could essentially just let Alexander Mattison go, I believe. I'm going to go look at his contract again, Madison's, but I believe it was a pretty weak contract. Okay, they give him $1.65 million guaranteed. That probably means they wouldn't just cut him. A 1-year, $2 million contract, but $1.65 million is guaranteed. It's not a strong contract. It's only a 1-year, $2 million deal. But for a running back to get over $1.5 million guaranteed probably ensures that he doesn't just get cut right away or anything. Like if there's a training camp cut, like say Khalil Herbert, people have talked about might get cut and maybe he lands on the Cowboys. And like this is a spot that like somebody could land here too. But it probably doesn't if Herbert did, it would push Madison back. But the way I'm reading that contract is Madison wouldn't just get cut in August for that person because they gave him some real guaranteed money. But But yeah, it's tough for the running backs to score big points in this offense if they're really, really bad, right? I don't think you can expect the 20 plus carries. The receiving stuff could maybe be there. But yeah, it's kind of like a low upside profile, but he's cheap enough that, I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth on Zamir White. I'm not super like completely out on him. I'm certainly not smashing him. I can see where you could be either way, frankly. You could be saying you should smash him because you're really high on the talent profile, and this dude's got no competition and he's the workhorse. Or you could be like, why would I draft this guy who had a questionable profile, was a committee back in college as well, didn't play at all until the last 4 games of last year. And yeah, like there's not a lot of competition there, but he doesn't rise above that competition. They're all bad and the offense is bad and it's just going to be bad. Like he's a total dead zone back and you could be completely out on him. I'm like, I don't see upside, and I usually don't draft running backs where I don't see upside, but I also think he could be like, because his price down so much, he could be like a moderate win player. If he just stays healthy all year, he could be this year's Rachaad White, not be super efficient. Probably won't catch as many passes as Rachaad White, but he caught 15 balls last year in limited playing time. It wouldn't be crazy if he catches 35, 40 passes and he returns like, RB 10 or RB 12. That like that's he finishes RB 10 or RB 12 on the season because he plays 17 games and he gets all the work. It wouldn't be crazy, and you're getting him in like the 8th or 9th round. So I get a little bit of exposure to him on this idea that, especially in best ball and managed, less likely to take him in best ball. That type of player with the workload that can manifest. Now it could also just go away. That's the other key thing about dead zone backs is like, and I'm worried about that with Rachaad White again this year. The upside of it is he stays in the role the whole year, gets all the work, and he's a win at an 8th round or 9th round price tag because of all that work. The way that it doesn't work out is they do sign somebody, or even Alexander Madison somehow looks better than White at times this year and takes a bunch of his work. And he's just not in the role because he's not good enough. And that's a possibility as well. So yeah, I don't know. The running back room is a tricky one to parse, but that's how I'm thinking about it. It's part of why I would give Laube a little bit more credit than most small school guys as well, is that there's such fragility in front of him in the backfield that there seems to be room for a running back to just go out and do stuff. And then as we were looking at the wide receiver depth chart, that's sort of the other philosophy with Michael Mayer is like, this team has so few like real skill position talents that like this has to be a 2 tight end set. You give me Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers with both Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer on the field. Now I'm intrigued a little bit. I mean, Trey Tucker's going to rotate in he's a vertical threat. He's a really high ADOT guy. Like if we go to the yards per outrun database and we go Trey Tucker last year, he only had a few targets, but we see a 19.2 ADOT. That's insanely high. He's just a deep threat. He'll also get some carries as well as like a gadget player, motion guy. He had 10 rush attempts last year, 19 catches on 34 targets. Like this is not, a meaningful profile to the overall target volume of the other players. But he'll factor in because he'll threaten the safeties and he'll be a gadget player and get some manufactured touches and those things. But yeah, there's plenty of room for Davante Adams at this stage of his career to continue to be, let's go back to the yards per hour, continue to be a 30% target share guy. He had a really tough year last year. I want to emphasize the targets per hour run column here. Still at 29.4%. Really strong, right? This guy earns targets per route. And then I want to emphasize this column. Yards per target, 6.7. Way worse than all of his recent seasons. Really did not mesh well with Jimmy Garoppolo, who couldn't get the ball down the field, doesn't complete passes more than like 20 yards down the field, is basically nothing outside of the Shanahan system where he can complete short passes and get yak, which isn't really Davante Adams' game. He's not just a deep threat, but he is somebody who needs to win in the intermediate range to set up some of the shorter passes as well. That's what created Adams' yards per route run. You can look at this yards per route run and say he's getting old, he's falling off, but these numbers are all elite. Whether it's 2.96 or 2.45 is elite. Falling to 1.97 when it actually was an increase in the target earning, but a massive decrease in the after the target efficiency, which is really heavily, based on the QB play in this scenario. I'm a little bit less concerned about that. The other guy, it's so funny, I have Adams also in the second one on the chart. But the other guy that's similar to him is DeAndre Hopkins. I was talking about him on a recent Ceiling Bananas with Sean Siegel. Hopkins last year has this really big 0.76 weighted targets per out run. So did Adams. They tie for second highest in the NFL in this stat, behind Tyreek Hill. Why am I a little bit more out on Hopkins at a way cheaper price? Well, these numbers are not these numbers. The targets per out run are not this elite. This tells you something about Davante Adams. Hopkins is still really, really good, but these are different levels. And then you also see this, as yards per target has been weak 2 years in a row compared to several years of really good peak. And it's like, okay, we're kind of outside that peak. Now his yards per out run have kind of rebounded from his own standing, but look at like compared to Adams. Like Adams used to be a 2.5 plus guy in recent years, and last year fell to 1.97. For Hopkins, we've had multiple recent seasons. Right, these are all still good numbers for Hopkins. He's a very good receiver. But like back in 2017, 2018 is when Hopkins was the absolute stud, right? That's when he was 2.4, 2.5 yards per route run. Then he's been kind of puttering along for a little while in different ways. The targets per out run crater here in 2021. The yards per target's been down the last 2 years. Again, these two elements equate to yards per route run. Targets per route, yards per target equals yards per route run. The sample of routes as well, the fact that he earned a bunch of this volume on only 500 routes, Adams did it on almost 600, right? The 2 years prior, he actually missed a lot of time and was in the 300 to 400 route range. That's Hopkins. Adams has been consistently still running 550 plus routes over the last 3 years. I'm less concerned about the age cliff with Adams because of a yards per target blip in one season compared to some of these, other elements in Hopkins' profile that are up and down. And then I'm also more concerned about the target volume again for Hopkins with the Calvin Ridley addition and maintaining this real, this targets per out run even on the 25-26 level. Like it's probably going to come down because there's other important players in the passing game. So Hopkins does get influenced by that. Adams, we were just talking about, and the reason that we got into this comparison and this conversation, still has no one to stop him from getting 30% targets per out runs. I understand Brock Bowers is going to be a rookie stud, but there's room for Brock Bowers to do that. And then you have Jacoby Myers, who, I guess I should have thrown him up too. Let's look at his targets per out run profile real quick. In the 22 range, it was at 20% last year. His yards per out run at times has been really strong. It's also been in the 1.5 to 1.6 range. He's a good, not necessarily great wide receiver. It's kind of going to his targets per out run is going to be in the 20 to 25 range. It's not going to be elite. And it's, his good, whether a season's good is going to go with, the yards per target, which has been, it was really good early in his career. It's been more average in the last couple of years. He also, you see, probably influenced by bad quarterback play last year. I like Jacoby Myers. I think he's a fine mid-round wide receiver pick in Underdog. I don't make that pick a lot, but I'm okay with it. I like him as a player for sure. But this isn't a guy that's going to steal a ton of volume from Davante Adams if Davante Adams is right. Brock Bowers could steal some, and the combination of them could steal some. I also, I'm bouncing around. I apologize. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do Michael Mayer real quick too. Because for a rookie tight end, Michael Mayer, this is why I was kind of in on him. He did some intriguing things. I guess not that much. The targets per out run wasn't that great, but the yards per target, I think, was the big part of it. 8.2 yards per target at a 6.4 ADOT shows some strong yards after the catch ability and some of that stuff. But the yards per out run of 1.1 isn't really, really strong. But I do think his profile, tight ends take a little time to build, and the fact that we saw some good ball and hand ability from him last year is solid. But so last year we get Adams, we get Myers. Tucker's actually third on the team with 331 yards. Mayer's fourth with 304 yards. There's not a lot of competition here. Brock Bowers coming in. Well, first of all, this isn't in a passing game that only threw for 3,600 yards. I mean, if they can throw for a little bit more, because things were really poor in the first half of the year with Garoppolo, that would be helpful if they throw for a little more. But if Bowers comes in and has 800 to 1,000 yards right away as a rookie, I think, maybe that comes from Adams a little bit. Maybe that comes from Myers a little bit. Probably it comes from this group of 200 to 350 guys where it just consolidates more, because none of those guys is particularly strong. Renfro's not there anymore. Hooper's not there anymore. Tucker and Mayer probably still have roles. But I could see Merritt taking a step forward and actually having a bigger year 2, even with Bowers there, if they run some 12 personnel and he develops as a talent. He was a really strong prospect, and that's why I said I actually do really like taking him very late. But all of this is to say that, like, I'm still a little bit in on Adams in the second round. I don't take a ton of him. I don't want to be out on a guy who had 175 targets last year. If you go to his overall profile, 175 last year, 180 the year before, 169 the year prior to that. This is a guy who earns massive volume and has continued to earn massive volume. Pretending like the age cliff is definitely hit as I, in my opinion, a little bit premature. It's based purely on the lack of efficiency on this yards per target element. And if that rebounds and he maintains the target earning, you're going to want him in the second round. Like it's a good profile. Again, he's not my highest drafted second round receiver, but I take some of him. I don't take as much Myers, but I can see why you might. It's more just a concern about the upside in the offense, and probably that he's the one that gets hit the most by a Bowers breakout. I do take a lot of Bowers because what I'm also emphasizing here is there's not a lot in this passing game. Adding Bowers and Adams working well in tandem, like I said, probably elevates the team total of passing yards up from 3666 to whatever 4,000 plus, because you're talking about a more functional passing game that has two real threats. Last year, you only had two guys doing much, and Myers is probably better serviced as like a third guy in that passing game. And so he probably slides down the totem pole if Bowers is a true smash in rookie year. So that is kind of the way that I'm thinking of the Raiders, how I'm playing the Raiders. I'm going to jump into your guys' comments here in a second. Let's see if I'm on the clock any drafts. Got back on the clock in one sprint. This is the one where I threw Algier in right after I took Herbert. The guy in the turn went Musgrave. Stafford, this is a sprint. Where I grabbed Herbert to pair with that McConkey team. We just looked at this a little bit ago. It's a team that has Bowers. I really like the squad. I have Achane and Chase Brown. And I think Algier is an interesting play. There was some conversation about him having a big role from Zach Robinson, although he also talked about like different points of the season. It sounded to me like maybe he factors in some, maybe he doesn't, but it sounded clear that he's their number 2. And I think that's big. If I do still think Bijan's going to have a massive workload, and the standalone value is going to be limited for Algier. But if Bijan were to miss some time, I want Algier exposure as a handcuff. So that would be, an upside play there in that regard. Let's go to the chat for a little bit. I saw you guys throwing a lot of interesting chats in there while I was going through all of that. Marcel Reese, you guys were still going with the remember some guys. I always like catching the last names. Rich Gans, who I was thinking of when I typed Kerry Collins, they're the same dude. Michael Bush, Louisville legend. Shout out Michael Bush. Brian Edwards, fun one. Marcel Reese, Latavius Murray. One of the two Zach Millers in the NFL at that time. Yeah, that was wild. Ruined all our databases. It's not even a common name. Charles Woodson, Napoleon Kaufman. When you were drafting Sean yesterday, it sounded like y'all were actually buying your own fake downside on Bowers. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there are downside scenarios. Again, you can't draft scared. Like, you got to draft for ceiling stuff. You're saying that Bowers is just a dynamic playmaker right away that elevates the offense. And the thing that Sean and I disagree on is Adams, where I think he thinks Bowers can really hurt Adams. I think if Bowers is that kind of a playmaker, that it elevates Adams. Because I still think Adams has plenty of room to have a 30% target share, even if Bowers steps into a 20% target share. I think it hurts Jacoby Myers, and there's no one else in this passing game that we just went over. And so I think it creates this scenario where actually Adams can work off of another player a little bit rather than having to beat double teams every time. That's why his efficiency was so bad. He earns 175 targets, but it's all against double teams because who else are they guarding, right? And he's still earning that volume. That's the thing. I'm like, there's no one else in the passing game. Your quarterbacks suck. There's no other receivers earning any defensive attention, and you earn 175 targets still. That's a good profile. That's like the Garrett Wilson stuff that I'm in on. I'm like, dude, this guy still was an alpha despite a situation where he's the only thing that the team had a game plan for. Sebastian Janikowski, that's a good one. We got Historical Anomaly saying, thought Trey Trey Tucker would mostly be a kick returner coming out of college. He did have some spike weeks. Agree that his snaps may be limited with the Raiders playing 12. Maybe Diontae gets traded and opens up some work for Turner. I think those are interesting notes. Best ball guy, really appreciate you with the super chat. I'm going to go buy a beer. I think we found Cade Stover's burner account. What else were we talking about? Uncle Ted says, give me Rico Dowdle, Moss, Vidal, Estime, and Brooks all over Zamir. Those are some late names as well thrown out there. Do you think Bowers and Miller could have some similarities to the 2010-2012 Patriots? I know QB is way worse. I mean, I think like similarities, no, probably not. Like in the way that we might think about it, they don't have the type of playmakers. Well, I mean, obviously Bowers is. Like, I'm trying to think of I don't think Mayer is as good as either of the two Patriots tight ends. Is sort of the way that I would put it. So like, yeah, I think it's more like the traditional 12 personnel stuff where the Patriots thing is always the thing we talk about, but no one actually lives up to it. The reason we're still using an example from 12 years ago is it's not that common for two tight ends to like be super dynamic in the same offense. So I guess what I'm saying is I think it's more likely that we make that comparison than they don't actually live up to it as a tandem, but they do okay. At the same time, like, I still think Brock Bowers is really good. I think Mayer could be, productive alongside that. Part of the reason I say he's a really good late round pick is there's contingent value too. Like if Bowers were to miss some time this year at all, I think Michael Mayer's a really great, like, waiver wire pickup in redraft leagues and all of that stuff. I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth there because I'm saying that Mayer has like upside to his profile in year two, and then I'm also saying he's not, good enough to really. It'll be interesting. I guess the reason I don't think this is because of Davante Adams is really what it comes down to. Like I'm thinking in my head, like they can't be the focal point of the offense because Davante Adams is there. But maybe I'm oversimplifying it. Oh, the thing we didn't do that I need to do is we didn't actually really talk a ton about Brock Bowers, which I think I did on another show, but let's just really quick look at Brock Bowers' really hilarious profile. So look, I always love this stat, the rushing that I just highlighted. In his career, 19 carries, 193 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. He averaged over 10 yards per carry on like 20 carries. He's a tight end. Why was he getting 20 carries? That's absurd. He had 4 carries as a true freshman. He had 9 more the next year, 6 the year after that. That's like, 9 carries in 15 games, 6 in 10 games. It's more than a carry every other week. Again, he's a tight end. What are they doing? Who's even like the audacity to game plan to give your tight end rushing attempts every other week? Like, what are we doing? That's something that maybe should happen twice in a season. But he's Brock Bowers, and then he also averages 10 yards per carry on it and scores 5 touchdowns and scores at least 1 rushing TD every year of his college career. In 15 games as a true freshman, he steps into a really good Georgia passing attack and has 882 yards on 56 catches and 13 touchdowns as a true freshman over Jermaine Burton, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell. George Pickens barely plays, but is on this offense. James Cook is on this offense. Darnell Washington's on this offense. Zamir White's on this offense. Brock Bowers, none of those guys had over 500 yards. They're all NFL players now. Brock Bowers has 882 and 13 TDs. He's like the whole offense. And then in 2022, he comes back in 15 games and one-ups it. He only has 7 TDs, but he goes from 56 catches to 63, 882 yards to 942. Obviously, Georgia's in a lot of plus game scripts. They win every game. They're not throwing a massive amount. So again, I highlight him versus his teammates. Ladd McConkey does have a 58-catch season that year, 762 yards, but Bowers clearly leads the team in every receiving category. Adonai Mitchell and Jermaine Burton had both transferred at this point, which is part of why McConkey consolidated the secondary work, but you still have Brock Bowers as the clear number one, and he elevates everything that he had done the year prior. And then in 2023, he ends up only playing 10 games because he has that injury, but he's on pace to actually shatter those numbers again. He already had 56 catches in the 10 games. You give him 5 more games, say they go all the way to the title game again, he's going up to like 75 catches in this season. He's already at 714 yards. You're talking about him getting to 1,000 in this year 3 season. He has 6 touchdowns already at that point. He's finishing at like 9. Yeah, I mean, and then if we go to the Georgia team stuff, even though he missed, the rest of it, he outproduced McConkey. McConkey only played 9 games. Dominic Lovett, these other guys, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, these guys, Bowers in 10 games still leads the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, right? This is a team that still doesn't have, 6 TDs is enough to lead the team. They don't have a massive amount of passing production is what I'm trying to spit out here, even though they're an incredibly good team. Obviously, they go 13-1. So yeah, I mean, the production stuff, like for a tight end to have meaningful collegiate production is a major deal. And for him, it is meaningful. It is like dominant from a young age. It's this dominating profile of other NFL talents, elite, market shares and dominator rating and production from the true freshman season. He's a stud. He's an absolute stud. Observations of life. I just got to your comment after I said that. I feel like Theo is going to be better than Bowers. Christy says, I still draft White sometimes, but it's an aren't you worried, in my opinion. That's where I'm at with him as well. Benny says Baltimore has tried to replicate that, or hasn't tried to replicate that. The tight ends is maybe. Oh, you guys were talking about this in the chat. Like, can you think of any other successful tight end duo? Like, yeah, a lot of good questions and chats in here about that tight end duo stuff that I just was talking about as well. Historical Anomaly says, thinking back to the best tight end duo of all time, thinking back to Mark Chmura and Keith Jackson, besides Gronk Hernandez, Ertz Goddard for a while. But even that, like, Goddard was being held back by Ertz to a degree. Christy says, dead zone backs outside the dead zone is a strange problem in fantasy this year. Agreed. I think in best ball, you can play it. In seasonal, you don't play it. That's the cliff notes. In best ball, you can play it. Dead zone backs outside the dead zone. Different opportunity cost equation outside the wide receiver window, especially. You start to get Zamir White falling a little bit. And we were talking, we're looking at some of my drafts where in the 7th round, the wide receiver window is already closed and I can't get access to the upside wide receivers. You can take Zamir White at that point. I'm okay with it. Like, part of the issue with the dead zone is the opportunity cost equation, what you give up in your build at other positions. The elite tight ends are gone and the wide receiver window is gone. And then Zamir White is one of the running backs. The tricky part is there's so many good running backs in that range. Like, I want to take Raheem Mostert more than I want to take Zamir White. Guy led the NFL in touchdowns last year, and I think he's an efficiency marvel. Zamir White, I'm hoping, is, getting a lot of work and is at least half decent. But I can definitely see the paths for Zamir White with the volume and some of the black box efficiency stuff. So yeah, I understand taking some exposure to him for sure. Are we worried about Getsy as OC? I'm certainly not worried. I mean, that's another one of those things with the quarterback play and everything else that's a little bit concerning. Defensive head coach, play calling could be run heavy, etc. Historical Anomaly says, as a Bears fan, I would be worried about Getsy. I think the Raiders would have gone after Fields if not for Getsy. That's interesting because that just would have been a not very good fit, is what you are saying. You guys were talking about this. You guys were talking about this 2 tight end thing for a while. William asked if I made that sheet. I was showing you guys the yards per out run stuff. Get it from a site behind a paywall. It is PFF data. It is my own sheet. I do not make it publicly available because it's not my data to share, but I do like to, give you guys some glimpses now and then when it makes sense. Yeah, you guys are just going back and forth. Benny and Hoosier here in the last little bit. I think we're going to wind it down. If you haven't yet, please go subscribe. Trying to get to 2,000 subscribers on the channel. We've been building it up this summer. Really appreciate you guys. Turn on those notifications for when I go live next time. Like the video. Drop some comments after the video. That always helps. I will jump in there right now and answer all the comments from recent streams, because I know I've been needing to do that. I'll make sure to get to these ones in the next day or so as well, after a few trickle in. Appreciate you guys hanging out. This was a blast. We're all caught up on all my drafts. This has been Stealing Signals. See ya.